The story begins in a certain house. Right now, several men are dragging a woman and a girl away. They are clearly doing this against their will. They turned out to be the mother and sister of the blonde-haired guy. He tried his best to stop the villains, but unfortunately he was too weak to do so. Suddenly the hero opened his eyes and saw an unfamiliar ceiling in front of him. It seemed that everything he had just seen was just a dream. However, he did not immediately come to his senses and realize this, so he suddenly jumped out of bed and called his mother. Only then the guy realized that he woke up. Now the hero could not understand where he was. It was not even his body, and he had no idea what this place was. Suddenly his head started to hurt really badly, and it seemed like old memories from his real life started to come back to him. In fact, he was one of the warriors of the past who entered the immortal realm to fight a mythical demon. Unfortunately, his entire group was trapped. The scenes of his comrades' deaths flashed before his eyes. It seemed like only he was lucky enough to be reborn in another world. His name in the past was Yi Fusheng. In reality, everything was a little more complicated. In this body, two personalities were combined, a young and rather weak guy, as well as one of the strongest cultivators of the past. Now he called himself Ye Tian. Suddenly, someone knocked on his room door, but he didn't want to talk to or see anyone right now. It turned out to be a young and attractive girl. She turned to the guy and asked if the young gentleman had woken up. Her name was Ye Mushan. She was the manager of Sandy's company, and she came to take care of him, and she was also going to help him in all his affairs. The hero immediately made it clear that he was not happy to see her. He knew that she was only here to monitor everything and report it to her superiors. But in fact, the girl was simply fulfilling her master's request. He, by the way, told her that everything would be very simple. But how did everything turn out this way? As a result, Ye Mushan found herself a hostage of the situation. She had to do everything as she was ordered, so she gives the hero a certain document and a special black card. Once Yi Tian signs this paper, he will be able to use the unlimited amount of funds that are on this credit card. The girl advised the guy to agree, since then he would have huge reserves of funds at his disposal, but the hero simply knocked the thing out of her hands. The guy was really angry about this. Did they really think that he was still not good enough for them not to throw him out somewhere far away? The manager didn't know what to do. She was just following her master's instructions. If the young master broke off friendly relations, then it would be bad. But it was still hard to argue with the fact that this was, in fact, a bribe, an influential family willing to pay a lot of money to ensure that everything went according to their plan. Currently, Ye Tian has 3 years left, and while he still has the opportunity to become stronger, he must go to a special place to obtain his combat profile. All this time, the hero was in the hospital. The guy decided not to waste time, and as soon as he had the opportunity, he began to meditate. It immediately became clear that his body was currently in a very weak state, and at the same time he needed to speed up the cultivation process as much as possible. Centuries of experience had its advantages. The hero knew that for this he simply needed to find the right exercise, and he was doing it right now. Suddenly he finally succeeds. This technique was simply ideal. It was previously called the technique of 9 transformations. Those who train it can become as powerful as a rock. Even if their skills are not much stronger than the opponent, they still gain a significant advantage. But in order to use this technique properly, it was necessary to comply with certain conditions, the main one being having a flawless body. This was indeed a problem, as even in his past life, Ye Tian had not been able to fully utilize the potential of this technique, and in this state it will be simply impossible for him to do this. First, he needs to somehow improve his physical condition. A few days later, the hero had fully recovered and was able to leave the hospital. He put on his school uniform and went to school. Today, as usual, he was late for class. Right now, the teacher was teaching his least favorite subject, namely mathematics. The young woman was pleased with the teacher, but from her look it was immediately clear that she didn't like the guy. The teacher started yelling at him, because who allowed him to enter the classroom without permission? And his classmates laughed. He was really unlucky today. The woman really had something to be angry about, because Ye Tian was always late for her lesson. It seemed like he was just making fun of her. This time her patience snapped, and she wanted to take the hero to the teacher's room. Today she wants to get him expelled. Only one of his classmates stood up for the boy. She was sure that he had not done it on purpose, since her classmate was a very kind person. The teacher didn't want to hear about it either. How could he have done it unintentionally if this student had already been late a dozen times? However, the hero's friend insisted that if the woman didn't believe her, then at least let her listen to Yi Tian, since he wasn't even given the chance to speak. The teacher agrees, but only a certificate from the hospital stating that the hero did not arrive on time due to illness will convince her otherwise. To her great surprise, Yi Tian had just such a thing in his pocket. He really did come late for a good reason. This made the girl even more angry. She couldn't believe that this hooligan was telling the truth. The paper was probably fake. But no matter how she looked, it was impossible to find fault. The certificate was indeed signed by a real, licensed doctor. In the end, it was only thanks to his classmate that the guy was finally able to sit for his class. He would be very grateful to this girl. She looked very sweet and claimed that she hadn't really done anything special and that any good person would have done the same. A classmate asked the hero how he was feeling now and why he was in the hospital. He replied that he was fine now and that he was feeling great. A few minutes later, the lesson was already coming to an end, and the teacher had another very important announcement regarding extracurricular activities. As it turns out, next week is their second anniversary in town, and according to the order, the top 3 second-year students will go to the island for a week. After this, all the students began to rejoice, although they understood that only 3 of them would be worthy. But each of them must definitely try their hand. In reality, it was a bit more complicated. They would be choosing from the best second-year class in the entire country, and the students were wondering how they could become the best. After this, everyone turned their attention to the hero. Apparently, he was not the most popular student in the class, quite the opposite. One guy stood up from his desk and suggested expelling Ye Tian from the class. He would definitely drag everyone down, and they would definitely have no chance of winning. The other children unanimously supported him. They all wanted the hero to be transferred to another class as soon as possible or even expelled from school altogether. The only person who supported the guy was again his girlfriend. She was sure that they couldn't do that to him. However, at that moment, Ye Tian looked at her and asked her not to interfere. It was clear from his face that he was not at all upset and that he had a plan. He would be able to stand up for himself. The guy himself wouldn't mind transferring to another class, but are all his classmates really sure that there's no one stupider than him? The student who proposed this idea claimed that the hero was not only the worst in his class, he was actually the worst in the entire school. Ye Tian wasn't angry at all, but simply asked him if he was so confident in his words. And besides, such statements needed to be at least supported by some arguments. The schoolboy responded by saying that he was ready to put even his own life on the line. He had no doubt that the hero was the worst of all those he knew. This is exactly what the guy was trying to achieve. Now he had a real reason to prove to everyone around him that they were all very wrong. He would make them change their minds. After this, the arguments died down. All the students just looked at each other and thought about how this argument might ultimately end. After this lesson, there was a big break. All the children went to the cafeteria to have lunch, and Ye Tian was no exception. The hero was about to go alone, but suddenly he heard a girl's voice behind him. It turned out to be his friend. Her name was Lin Long. At first, the guy thought that she needed some help, because usually girls were never particularly interested in him. But in fact, his classmate really wanted to have lunch with him. Ye Tian happily agreed and looked quite happy. After this, the couple went to the cafeteria together. They chatted pleasantly on the way there, and the evil classmate was nearby at that time and was going to take revenge on the hero. When a guy and a girl walked together, everyone around said that they looked like a very cute couple. It must be cool when your girlfriend studies with you in the same class. Because of this, Lin Long was quite embarrassed. After all, they were still just friends. Ye Tian actually blushed too. It was clear that he was also embarrassed. At one point, the hero notices that his pockets are empty and tries for quite a long time to find something in them, but he is unsuccessful. After this, the guy turned to his classmate and said that he had a small problem and needed to step away for a couple of minutes. It turned out that he accidentally forgot his wallet in the dorm room. Now he needs to go back there and get it. Ye Tian promised his friend that he would be back in just a couple of minutes, and she could go ahead. He would soon catch up with her. After this, the hero, without waiting for an answer, quickly ran to the right place, and the girl shouted after him that she understood everything and would wait for him at the table. The guy lived in a regular room for 4 people. There was quite a bit of space here, but in fact, this was not the main problem. The worst part was his neighbors. One of them was currently trying to find Ye Tian to make him do the laundry. There were only 2 cohabitants, and they both constantly bullied the hero. At some point, one of them breaks down and goes looking for him. But they didn't have to do that, because the guy had already come into the room himself. He wasn't going to mess around with them, and just wanted to quickly deal with the hooligans. But at first the guy simply greeted his neighbors politely. But the men were clearly not happy about this. One of them immediately started yelling at him, asking why the hell he was gone for so long. Where could he be hanging around for so long? There was work for him. The man tried to force Ye Tian to wash his dirty clothes. He should do it as soon as possible if he didn't want to get into trouble. At the same time, the man also threw some kind of metal utensil towards the hero, but the student was not afraid and easily dodged the throw.
The roommate never received an answer to his question about how this brat dared to hide from him when he had been looking for him for several hours.
Suddenly, some man grabbed him and tried to pull him away. It turned out to be a student who lived in another room. He was already really tired of this shouting and fighting. Because of this, their dorm was constantly being punished. It could give the impression that only idiots lived here. The boy asked his neighbor to control his anger, but the older man wasn't even going to do it. Does this weakling really think he can hold it back? Immediately after this, the hero intervenes in the conversation. He had no intention of offending any normal people, so he orders the offender to let the schoolboy go. But the man felt his absolute power. The guy who wanted to calm him down was called Zong. Apparently he had some problems with his head because of which he thought that he could become a hero. Besides, the roommate had been itching for a long time, and right now he wanted to let his anger out. And this was the perfect opportunity to do so. What he really wanted to do was kick Yi Tian, so he attacked him first with his fists, and at that moment, lightning appeared all over the hero's body. The guy easily dodged such a slow lunge in his direction and then carried out an instant counterattack. As a result, the man missed a blow to the stomach. The elder didn't even understand what had happened, and the hero was already behind him. Now he was going to throw him over himself. Everything turned out as Yi Tian wanted. The blow was very powerful, and the man hit his head on the hard floor with all his strength.
Zhang was very surprised when he watched this picture. What was this fool doing? Because these people would want to take revenge on him in any case.
However, the guy apparently wasn't afraid of this at all. He was already tired of the constant bullying from them. His two neighbors were named Wang Shang and Lu Rong.
The hero asked Van how many socks he thought he had to wash over the past 2 years. Let's assume there were 100 pairs in total.
Now Yi Tian is going to give his offender 100 slaps. He clearly deserves it, and besides, it's not that much for an idiot like him. It turned out that the hero was not joking at all. He lowered himself and began to hit the man in the face. He wanted to immediately begin carrying out his sentence. Van couldn't come to terms with what was happening. How dare this brat hit him? Was he really so confident in his abilities? Now he should take revenge. But as it turned out, this was not at all easy to do. The guy continued to count from 1 to 100, and each time this was accompanied by a strong slap with his palm to the man's face. After a while, a whole crowd had already gathered near their room because usually it was Van who mocked everyone around him. But now everything was completely the opposite. When Ye Tian counted to 30, his hand was already tired. This man's face was hard as a concrete wall. Maybe that's why he was so stupid. But there were still 70 slaps left. The hero suggested that Zhang continue his work after all. He also had to constantly endure these two. But it was immediately clear from the guy's face that he wasn't very interested in this. After all, he still had to live in this dorm. However, Ye Tian insisted, or the student wants to be kicked right now. He should stop being afraid of everything. Zhang had to choose the lesser of two evils, so he came to his senses a little and decided that he would have to give the bully a couple of slaps after all. However, his fear did not go away. The guy very slowly began to approach Van. Apparently, in any case, it would end badly. Their neighbor lying on the floor, for obvious reasons, did not like this at all. And out of desperation, the man decided to grab the guy's hand. The bully was about to bite her with all his strength, but he didn't succeed, and Zhang only miraculously managed to pull her back thanks to his quick reaction. The hero was very amused by what he had just seen. His offender looked like a stupid and wild dog that only knew how to bite. After this, Wang completely loses his mind, and the man rushes at Ye Tian, screaming that he is going to finish him off right now. However, the guy was still much stronger, so he simply gave the man his 31st punch to the face, and then continued counting. Eventually, his partner's face turned red as a tomato, so the man had to admit defeat and apologize. The hero is already quite tired of doing this, so he decides to spare Van, but only on the condition that the bully stops humiliating the people around him. In fact, the man at that moment was ready to promise anything, so he immediately fell to his knees and swears with all his heart to become good. After this, Ye Tian finally takes what he came here for and goes to the dining room, and he also calls Zhang with him. The crowd that had gathered was a little surprised. These two had never been particularly close before, so why were they now acting like brothers? Lu Rong immediately ran to his comrade to find out how he was feeling. It was clear from the man's face that Wang was furious, but he lied that everything was fine. In the dining room, Zhang finally decided to ask the hero how he managed to become so strong in such a short time. Today he was fighting really well. Ye Tian explained this by saying that he was very tired of the constant bullying from those around him, and there was only one way to stop it. He needed to become stronger. The guy understood this, but he was never able to get an answer to his question. because it is impossible to become stronger simply by snapping a finger. Suddenly, they heard Lin Long calling them over. She had already reserved a table for her classmate and had been waiting for him for quite a long time. A classmate asked the guy who the person with him was, and the hero introduced her to his dorm roommate. Now they will often appear together. The girl greeted Zhang with a smile on her face, which made him a little embarrassed. His friend was lucky. The beauty from the university saved a seat for him in the cafeteria. A couple of minutes later, the food was already in front of them, and the boys began to dine with a huge appetite. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. Suddenly, Ye Tian's tray of food flew from the table straight onto the floor. It turned out to be one of the most influential students in their school. He learned about Wang's situation and came to sort it out. The hero only managed to move back at the last moment, so as not to stain all his clothes. The bully asked him where he suddenly got his balls from. The guy didn't lose his head, but immediately got up from his chair and grabbed his offender by the clothes. They all need to learn something. He's not a weakling anymore. Zhang was very worried at this moment. Okay, those two idiots from the dorm, but this student has huge connections. If you fight with him, there could be consequences. Yi Tian also understood this very well, so he decided to simply show off his new abilities so that next time people like him would think twice before bothering him. To do this, he took the most ordinary plastic fork and told everyone to watch carefully what he could do with such a fragile thing. After this, the hero thrusts the cutlery with great force straight into the thick wooden table, but the plastic did not break, but pierced the furniture right through. After this, the guys leave, because if they are not welcome here, it will be easier to find another place to finish their meal in peace. At this time, the hooligan lay on the floor in surprise. He looked at the hole in the table for a long time, unable to understand how this was possible. Zhang asked the guy why he didn't hit him, whether he really didn't want to, and he replied that it was actually better to always keep a cool head and act rationally. After that, they went to the park right next to the school and sat under a tree. My friend was surprised that they would really eat right there, after all. The place looked completely inappropriate. Ye Tian, in turn, said that they just needed to wait a little. In a couple of minutes, they would have everything they needed. It turned out that the hero had already noticed the admiring glances of the other students in the school while still in the cafeteria, which could only mean that they too would want to become stronger. Soon, a large crowd of people gathered around the boys. They brought them food and drinks. Apparently, each of them had at least once faced bullying from hooligans. One guy in the crowd thanked Ye Tian for putting Wang in his place. In fact, everyone present would have been happy to do the same. And after this, all the students unanimously expressed their desire to become stronger. They wanted the hero to help them with this. Everyone saw hope in him. The guy didn't mind. They could train with his friend first. Zhang Wu was surprised after these words, but he didn't refuse. Yi Tian assured him that everything would be fine. For this, he put some of his spiritual power into his friend's body. This would help him become much more capable. The energy really helped. The first person who tried to knock Zhang down didn't succeed. It seemed like there was a gap between the two in terms of physical strength. The guy could easily stop his opponent's punches with his palm and then twist his wrist so that the opponent would end up in a grip. At the same time, Zhang himself could not fully understand where he got these abilities from and when he managed to become so strong.
Yi Tian explained to his friend that he had merely stimulated his potential a little, but most of these abilities were due to him alone.
Several other people from the crowd also became eager to try their hand at Zhang. Perhaps they would do better. But after just a few minutes, all those who had fought with the guy were lying on the ground. None of them had even managed to touch their opponent with a finger. The hero's friend still couldn't get used to the fact that all his movements had become so dexterous and his blows so precise and powerful. Now, the people in the crowd were finally convinced of their choice. They asked Ye Tian to make them as strong as Zhang. They no longer had the strength to endure the bullying. The guy replied that he would definitely help everyone. But for now, if they listened to him, they could count on his full support, and then no one would dare touch them. He also appointed his friend as a conditional assistant. Now he should talk more with these people. It is very important to have a big and strong heart. Zhang happily agreed to help. He would definitely do everything in his power, and the hero thanked him and said that he sincerely believed in it. In fact, although he was a modest guy, he had excellent physical abilities, and if he was given a little help with his development, he could become an excellent right hand. Suddenly, the hero began to remember his past, before he controlled the heavenly dimension, the wind and the clouds as one whole. Who would have thought that an ancient demon would attack him from ambush, and the ancient warrior would die and end up in the body of an ordinary teenager? In this world, the aura is very thin and not suitable for cultivation. Fortunately, the newly opened Shanhai allows it to accumulate. Since fate has given him a second chance, Yi Tian is obliged to learn as much as possible from the mistakes he made in his past life. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a classmate. She was in a hurry, and her face looked worried. Apparently she wanted to say something important. The girl warned her friend that the guy he put in his place in the cafeteria today was very dangerous, and that what he wanted most now was for the hero to be expelled. In fact, the guy understood this perfectly well, that Bully's name was Kiao Yu. But Ye Tian wasn't worried about it at all, and simply asked his friend if she believed him. Lin Long was very angry about this. Why was her classmate acting like a fool even in this situation? He needed to stop acting like a child. However, she still decides to trust him and goes about her business. Today they are going to meet in the library after classes. Zhang overheard their conversation and envied how cool his friend was, because even the hotties from the university were worried about him and even invited him to meetings. Hardworking students go to the library and some to tutors while lazy ones laze around in their dorms. The hero arrived here even earlier than his friend, so Lin Long had to spend a few more minutes looking for him. This made the girl a little angry, because they had agreed to meet at the entrance here, but for some reason Ye Tian was acting like a fool again. The first thing the classmate noticed was the books the guy was reading. She was surprised why he chose novellas. Ye Tian replied that these were not just novellas, but comprehensive literature that included everything from forensic medicine to anecdotes. Especially this book of classical power. It was simply incredible. The guy didn't even think that in a place with such an aura there were mentions of cultivators. Lin Long decides to give his friend a little test. Since he's so confident in his knowledge, he should be able to easily answer a couple of questions. After all, it was only 7 o'clock now, and classes ended at 6. There was no way he could have read all the course material in such a short time. This was clearly just a blatant excuse, and so the first question was to explain Newton's first law. To his classmates' great surprise, Ye Tian answered this question with ease, giving the impression that he knew Newton's first law by heart. It was truly incredible, because before this guy had difficulty remembering even the simplest words. How did he manage to do it now? Lin Long decided that this was all just a coincidence, so he needed to try again. He was probably just lucky. The easiest way to prove this was with a history textbook, since such books are full of long and drawn-out episodes, and if Ye Tian was lying, it would immediately become clear. To do this, the girl took out one of the largest history textbooks. Right now, her classmate needs to retell the topic they were assigned for the next lesson. However, the hero replies that remembering key moments is incredibly boring. He wanted to retell the entire book from the first to the last page. At first, Lin Long didn't even quite understand what he was talking about. Did he really want to say that he had memorized absolutely every page of this book? Even the smartest people couldn't do that. However, after a few seconds, she agreed, but there was a condition. If Ye Tian missed even one word, he would be on duty instead of her today. The guy immediately began to retell the ancient story of the first chapter of Chinese culture. Strangely enough, he actually spoke exactly as it was written on paper. This went on for quite a long time. The hero did not miss a single word during the several tens of minutes of his story. Lin Long was even more surprised by this. How did he manage to do this? Previously, she often helped him with his homework, because her classmates' academic performance left much to be desired. For a second, she even thought that there was a completely different person in front of her. There was no other way to explain such crazy progress. Meanwhile, Ye Tian continued to talk about ancient times and about where the first silk appeared, as well as about the monarchy system and officials in the government. At the same time, the hero was also reading a completely different book at the same time. This did not stop him from talking about the management of air forces during the war, as well as about the management of the division of labor. After about an hour, he finally finished his monologue and asked if her classmate had any more tests for him, but the girl was so surprised that she was simply at a loss. As it turns out, in the divine dimension, reading skills were one of the most important factors in the growth of your spiritual power. After all, if even one word is wrong, you will have to pay very dearly for such a mistake. No one is born invincible. However, Lin Long advised her friend not to be so arrogant, because even with such abilities, he had not yet passed the exams. To do this, he needs to learn all the answers. She just has some examples that the girl prepared herself. First, he should solve all these problems. The guy agrees, but it was clear from his face that he was not entirely interested in memorizing formulaic answers. Suddenly, the hero notices one interesting detail. All over her classmate's book, there were red marks in a very neat font, which gave her a certain aesthetic pleasure. Meanwhile, the girl sat behind him and looked at Ye Tian with a touching expression. Since when did he become so smart and attractive? Suddenly, there was a noise in the library. It seemed as if all the people around suddenly started whispering quietly among themselves. The reason for this was a very beautiful girl with long black hair. Her name was Fang Miao. She was considered one of the most popular students in the school. Lin Long became curious about what was going on, so she got up from her seat and went to look, and ordered her classmate to sit and continue studying. Almost all the library visitors came running and stood around the beauty. It was like fireflies flocking to a light source late in the evening. Each of the guys invited Fan Miao to sit next to him. Most likely, if the girl sat next to one of them, it would be the happiest day of his life. However, the beauty walked past all the tables to the very back of the room, and only there did she notice a suitable place for herself. It was the very table at which the hero was sitting, but Ye Tian told her that it was already occupied. The girl should look somewhere else. Fang Miao made it clear with her whole demeanor that she was not interested in this. She wanted to sit right here, so she confidently did what she had planned. At some point, the beauty notices a medical textbook. It's clear why she couldn't find this book for so long. The guy had it all this time. The girl just wanted to take the thing for herself, but the hero turned out to be not as pliable as the others around him. He grabbed her hand. Fang Miao was very surprised and a little embarrassed. No one usually behaved like that with her, and it seemed like this schoolboy had no manners at all. In turn, Yi Tian did not see anything wrong with his behavior. It seemed to him that this particular girl lacked a drop of decency. The beauty continued to look at him with a very disdainful gaze, and the guy still allows her to take the medical textbook, but it is unlikely to help her. Their conflict was interrupted by another event. Right then and there, one of the most popular guys in school walked into the library. His name was Tin, and he had a huge bouquet of red roses with him. It was immediately clear that he was going to give this gift to Fang Miao, but from her expression, it was clear that she was not happy to see him. Before turning to his beloved, Tin looked at the hero, wondering who this guy was and why the beauty was sitting at the same table with him. And only after that he gave a beautiful, expensive bouquet to the girl. He wanted to invite her on a date to a cafe. Would she agree to go with him? But that was not all. The guy wanted to say something very important. But why don't they stay alone so that no one interferes? Fang Miao was already tired of this conversation. If Ting had some business with her, then he should tell her about it right now. She was not going to go anywhere. The guy understands that there is no other way out and gets down on his knees. He says that he loves his chosen one very much and sincerely asks to give him at least one chance. When the girl realized that she was being offered a relationship, she immediately ordered this idiot to get off his knees. But Tin didn't listen to her and continued to stand his ground. The beauty had no choice but to grab his hand and wanted to drag him away. The guy in turn was persistent and claimed that his intentions were serious, promising to marry her immediately after graduating from high school. These words finally drove Fan Miao crazy, and she knocked the gift out of his hands. He should stop wasting his time. The girl would never agree to it anyway. Tin is not used to hearing refusals. He always gets what he wants, so he has to ask the beauty not to leave. Fang Miao no longer knows how to get this idiot to leave her alone. She needs to find some way, so she lies about already having a fiancé. Tin couldn't believe what he just heard, even if the girl doesn't like him. There's no need to deceive her by hiding behind a fictitious partner. Within a few seconds, the disappointment on the guy's face turned into intense anger. He was trying to find out the name of her fiancé and how this impudent man was better than him. It was bad because Fan Miao had indeed lied. She just needed to come up with some quick way to get rid of her pursuer. The beauty had no choice. The only person who could be suitable for the role of her partner was Ye Tian. She did not know anyone else present. At this time, the hero simply continued to calmly read one of the short stories. He could not even imagine that in a few seconds he would be announced as the groom of a girl he saw for the first time in his life. In the end, he was incredibly surprised. Everyone around him also couldn't believe it. How one of the most popular students in school could date such a weakling. Now, all the males suddenly began to envy Ye Tian. They would really like to be in his place at that moment. Tin seemed to be the most shocked of all. His body began to shake with anger, and his hands subconsciously clenched into fists, the veins even showing on them. The hero soon realized that he had again been drawn into some kind of absurd situation. Since when had he even had a bride? Disappointed by the refusal, the guy orders everyone around to immediately find Ye Tian for him and bring him here. Fang Miao could not understand what he was doing. She tried to stop him, but Tin became even more angry. He really wanted to know how such an idiot managed to steal his beloved from him. At this moment, Yi Tian gets up from his chair and says that no one needs to bother looking for him. It never occurred to him to hide from anyone. After this, the guy, with his head held high, pronounces his name, and it became clear from his behavior that he was absolutely not afraid. Lin Long was very surprised by this behavior. She had always thought of the hero as a weakling before. How could he change so much? After all, now the guy behaved completely differently. And only a little time had passed. He is not at all like what people say about him. Ting, in turn, was already warming up his fists. He once again asked the student standing in front of him if he really was the one called Ye Tian. The hero immediately confirmed it. And right after that, the popular high school student grabbed the guy by the shirt. He wanted to find out if the girl was lying about them dating. However, Ye Tian did not give a precise answer. He only asked in return, even if so, what he was going to do to him. Several people immediately began to support Tin. They were simply afraid of his connections, and all of them accused the guy of having the audacity to steal his girlfriend. In the end, Tin laughed arrogantly. Now he wants the guy to kneel before him and beg for mercy. Only then would he have a chance to stay alive. The high school student also had to promise that he would never go near Fang Miao again, but Ye Tian had no intention of following this ridiculous order. Suddenly, several school children ran up to the hero from behind and twisted his arms. They were his rival's henchmen, and they wanted to show that their leader never jokes. At this moment, everyone watching from the side began to whisper among themselves, each of them arguing over whether Ye Tian would kneel or not. In the end, most assumed that he was weak and would do anything. Moreover, Tin had all the most famous and cruel students of the school on her side, and now this guy has angered them, he will be in huge problems. At that moment, Fan Miao was very worried. She didn't want the events to turn out exactly like this. She felt very sorry for the hero, but the girl didn't know what she could do. Ye Tian didn't resist when he was pinned down by several people. He only replied that if they wanted someone to kneel, he could easily arrange it. The girl sighed with relief. Everyone around decided that now this weakling would simply kneel and be let go. It was still better than going to the hospital. Ye Tian's offenders stood next to him and laughed, each of them confident that this brat would fall to his knees in front of them right now and beg for mercy. One of them got tired of waiting and was about to speed up the process. But the hero noticed this and immediately stepped aside so that the bully's hand would not touch him. After that, he deftly grabbed the pen lying on the table and began to twirl it in his hand. Now the hero was going to fill this object with his power. Thanks to this, he managed to knock the hooligan down. The pen flew into his leg at high speed, causing him to lose his balance. As a result, the student ended up on the floor, and no one present could really understand what was going on, because Ye Tian's movements were too fast. But the hero didn't stop there. Thanks to his unique technique, he could still control the object that had absorbed a piece of his energy. With these manipulations, he managed to control the pen as a weapon, so Ye Tian dealt with all the offenders without even touching any of them. And all the hooligans could do was scream helplessly, because none of them could figure out who was beating them all the time, and whether this brat was really behind it. The hero responded with a grin and was surprised. Wasn't it they who wanted someone to bow their head to another right now? It was their idea after all. This only made the villains even more angry. Now they seriously intend to beat the guy with all their might. How dare he do such a thing? The guy found it funny to listen to this, because they would hardly have enough strength to touch him even once. Ordinary weaklings would never be able to cope with someone like him. Immediately after this, Ye Tian seemed to instantly disappear from the place where he was a second ago, causing the two attackers to fall to the ground. Everyone else was very confused after this, and now the hero had no trouble dealing with them using his spiritual energy. All this took the guy no more than a few seconds. In the end, all the hooligans were lying on the floor. None of them managed to leave even a scratch on Ye Tian's body. These school children really wanted to bring someone to their knees. Now they can enjoy their position as much as they want. However, even after this, several people still wanted to continue the fight. This guy thinks too much of himself. He is asking for huge problems. The guy, in turn, continued to be surprised at how ordinary hooligans could allow themselves to think that they were on the same level as him. After all, even if each of these idiots spent 10,000 years training, none of them would be able to even come close to his level. Fang Miao watched everything from the side and couldn't believe her eyes. This man had some kind of extraordinary energy and was reminiscent of ancient warriors. At some point, bright blue lightning appeared on the hero's hands. Right now, he was about to finally decide the question of who should bow their head. But the guy decided to do this in an unusual way. The same lightning appeared on his legs, which allowed him to jump high into the air. And after that, with lightning speed, with a few kicks, Ye Tian once again knocked several people to the floor. Now none of them showed any desire to get up and try their hand again. It was better to calmly accept their defeat. The high school student turned to Tin. At this moment, the popular student was trembling with fear. Now he realized that this guy was not a fool at all, but was simply hiding his potential. Ye Tian replied that it was simply modesty on his part, and it certainly wouldn't hurt for him to develop that character trait too. However, Tin didn't care at all whether the hero was actually stupid or some kind of genius. Today, in any case, he would beat him with all his might. The guy was already pretty tired of these threats. Oh, these mortals being just little bugs. they allow themselves to talk to him like that. The next moment, the popular student decides to attack from behind. The hero did not see this, so Fang Miao decides to help him and tries to push him to the side. Yi Tian wasn't afraid of such a weak blow at all, but he couldn't let anyone hurt the girl, so he covered her with his body. The beauty asked this idiot if he had really gone crazy. He should quickly stop this performance and leave. She didn't need such a groom anyway. However, Tin still had no intention of backing down. He didn't care who this high school student was to her. In any case, he wanted to kill him more than anything in the world. Fang Mao looked at the hero and thought that she could never have imagined that such a modest guy could be so cool and attractive. Meanwhile, Ting was heading towards Yi Tian again. It seemed he was tired of living. Now he would show him where the place was for a worthless person like him. To his great regret, he had no chance at all. This fool's actions only further angered the hero. Therefore, just as the schoolboy was about to hit him, the guy immediately disappeared right from under his nose, and in his place only small lightning bolts remained. It was very stupid of a weakling like him to continue to count on winning. Objectively speaking, he didn't have a chance from the start. Someone in the crowd remarked that it looked like the hero was trying to copy the legendary fist technique. But Fang Miao noted that it was not copying at all, because no living person had ever managed to copy such technology before. It was truly a unique original. In the end, Ye Tian decides to take pity on Ting at the last moment. He simply slaps him hard. This was because the bully offended his fiancée. And after that, another one, as a bonus for the fact that they dared to make fun of him with the whole crowd. Next time they should think several times before doing this to someone. And if this happens again, the hero will break the schoolboy's legs so that his entire gang will henceforth treat others with respect, and not even think about repeating something like this. After this, the guy called his girlfriend and suggested that she leave this place. She happily agreed. She had enough events for today. Fang Miao was very interested in Ye Tian. It seemed that he was far from an ordinary person. Now the beauty wanted to get to know him better. At the same time, the girl decides not to wait for the right moment. She immediately runs out after the guys and shouts after them, asking them to stop. The hero asked her if something had happened. Fan Mao actually wanted to apologize for what had happened, as she felt that the main blame lay with her. But the guy wasn't angry at all. He understood perfectly well that she had come to the library for a reason, but to find a way to get rid of her illness. The girl was very surprised when she heard this, because she had never had to tell anyone about the state of her health. The hero asks her not to bother her head with this. He just has good intuition. What was more important was that he knew a way to help cure Fang Mao's illness. After that, they parted ways. At some point, Ye Tian noticed that his girlfriend looked a little strange. Perhaps she was worried about something. As it turned out, Lin Long was very scared back then in the library. She was worried about her classmate when he fought against a whole crowd. In response, the guy simply patted his classmate on the head. She shouldn't worry so much, because he has enough strength to stand up not only for himself, but also for those who are dear to him. The dorm residents watched this whole scene from their windows. The single guys were very jealous. How dare they do this right in front of everyone? After all, not everyone has girlfriends. When the hero returned to the dorm, the first person to greet him was Zhang. He looked incredibly happy and had a large basin of water in his hands. It turned out that the friend had completely cleaned their room, and now the place looked much better. It seemed as if it had never been so clean before. Zhang was very tired and was about to go to bed, but one thing was troubling him. Wang and Lu had gone somewhere immediately after Ye Tian humiliated them. Was it possible that the men would return? The hero laughed at this question. Was his friend really so afraid of these two idiots? After all, they were so weak that they couldn't even resist two school children. But the guy was actually quite afraid of them. Hooligans really are a little crazy. It cost them nothing to come at night for revenge. But in any case, today was a beautiful day. It is quite possible that these two were so scared that now they don't even dare to think about coming here. Yi Tian suddenly made a very serious expression. If his comrade really cared about this, then he would never allow anyone to bully him again. We must not forget that society itself is very cruel, so a comrade must learn to stand up for himself. And the most important thing is to remain a good person. Zhang was so inspired by these words that he even got out of bed and promised his friend that he would definitely adhere to these very principles in his life. A few hours later, night fell. The schoolboy slept soundly, and the hero decided not to waste time, and began cultivating right then and there. Yi Tian had been doing this for 3 days already, but this body was still too weak to train the 9 divine transformations. In his past life, he was unable to rebuild his body for this technique and was defeated during the Void World War, which led to the destruction of his soul. Luckily, he was able to be reborn in this world. Now that fate has given him such a chance, he just needs to become stronger. That is why the hero continued his meditation with all his might. He carefully recited ancient prayers and asked the aura of heaven and earth to lead him to the right path. According to ancient records, the 9 divine transformations is the first technique of the 9, with which one can use the aura of the earth to form a golden body. In this method, physical strength should become limitless. If cultivation is successful, then with the help of energy you can stimulate your body to reveal its full potential. But unfortunately, Ye Tian hadn't been able to do this yet. After all, his physical condition was absolutely not prepared for this. Moreover, the aura of this world turned out to be even weaker than one could have imagined. It was difficult to even begin to cultivate in this direction. Damn, if he had the chaos beads, the hero would have already started deeper training and would have been able to reach the 3rd or 4th stage. At the same time, the guy did not want to give up at all. Although he felt enormous fatigue throughout his body, but he incredibly strongly wanted to try again. As it turned out, this was a huge mistake. During another attempt at cultivation, the hero felt a severe pain in his chest, after which he coughed up blood. Ye Tian decided that he should rest after all, but he didn't feel like sleeping at all. He preferred looking at the large shining moon in the window.
Another failure really upset the guy. Apparently he needs to take some kind of break, otherwise this body simply might not be able to withstand it.
Right now, in the corridor of their dorm, there were 2 men standing. These were the same Wang and Liu. It seemed they still had enough courage to return for revenge. Van was afraid that someone might notice them, but his accomplice insists that everything will be fine. In any case, they will have a release in a couple of days. Until then, he should keep his mouth shut. Suddenly, the man remembers why he came here. He really should talk less and do more. He incredibly strongly wants to punish the offender. The hooligans got closer to the room where the boys were sleeping and looked into the window. It seemed to them that they had both been asleep for a long time. So the men decide that this is the perfect moment to attack. The couple broke down the doors and climbed inside. Zhang was sleeping on the right bunk, the hero apparently on the left. The first thing the villains wanted to do was deal with Ye Tian. The hooligans climbed up to him with iron bars. They wanted to finish off this brat. At first glance, the guy was lying under the blanket because his bed was definitely not empty. First, the man wanted to break his legs and then hit him on the head. At some point, Zhang woke up because of the noise. The guy was very scared when he saw what was happening. He wanted to help his friend, but the fear was stronger. And the men continued to beat Ye Tian with all their might. Smiling in their eyes, it seemed that they were enjoying every second. That situation with the slaps really hurt Wang. At some point, they got tired of doing this. One of them jumped down and asked the other to remove the blanket and see if the guy was alive or not.
He stood with his head held high and admired himself. This stupid idiot dared to insult his master. That's why he needed to be put in his place.
But at some point, Liu realizes that something is wrong, because they beat the hero very badly, and he didn't even scream or move once. As it turned out, there was actually no one in the guy's bed. Apparently, he heard someone approaching and set up a decoy using a blanket and several pillows. As soon as the hooligans realized what was going on, the light in the room immediately came on. Ye Tian stood near the entrance and asked who it was that they were not looking for so zealously.
What are these 2 idiots doing in their room in the middle of the night? Have they both suddenly developed sleepwalking? No. Most likely these 2 are asking for trouble again.
Liu asked his greenhouse what to do. Because they were exposed, in response to this, the man ordered not to panic. This brat is stupid and won't do anything to them. Suddenly, Zhang addressed the hero from the top bunk. He told his brother that these hooligans had weapons on their backs, and that it was better for him to run away now.
However, Ye Tian was not the type of person who liked to run away from the battlefield. This situation, on the contrary, made him even more excited.
Centuries of experience in battles taught him that running away from the battlefield is a bad decision. If he had run away during the World War in his past life, it would have continued for a very long time. Van took the rebar in his hands with a joyful face. As it turned out, his birthday was in 3 days, so he decided to start celebrating a little earlier. And nothing could bring him more pleasure than beating up this brat. He will still have to pay for the humiliation that he brought upon him. At some point, the hero turned to the man and said if he really wanted to settle scores with him, then let him at least tell him what he understood about it. The bully replied that he was going to beat Ye Tian half to death and break every bone in his body. This was how he wanted to take revenge. So the guy needs to get down on his knees right now and beg for mercy, and also call Van Master 100 times. If he succeeds, then so be it. They will let him live. However, the hero believed that a dog like this villain was not worthy of being considered someone's master, so he again used his technique with blue lightning. At that moment, the guy started moving at incredible speed. The bully didn't even understand where he was hit from, and besides, the student disappeared from sight. Out of desperation, Wang began to simply wave his iron rod in different directions. In this way, he wanted to at least once hit his opponent. But as expected, no one was hit with anything. Yi Tian managed to easily dodge this ridiculous blow and send the bully flying with one powerful leg attack. Because of this, the man hit his back with all his strength against the wooden table. It was very painful. His whole body began to shake. In truth, the hero is lucky that his opponents are so insignificant, as this physical body is completely unsuited to fighting more powerful foes. When one of the men was already seriously injured, the second tried to take advantage of the moment and ran towards Yi Tian, hoping to hit him with the rebar. But this time too, the bully doesn't succeed. The guy makes a quick dash towards him and knocks the opponent down. Lu Yu turned out to be an even more worthless opponent than his accomplice. This man looked so pathetic that it was sickening to look at. At some point, he became so scared that he simply fell to his knees and began to whine about how much pain and fear he was in. But the second bully turned out to be stronger. He overcame the pain and got to his feet, gathering the determination to continue the fight. The revenge in his soul was still strong. Then the man once again rushes at the hero with an iron bar. He could not understand that he was not even close to his equal. At that moment, Zhang saw an opportunity to bring at least some benefit to his friend. The guy jumps on top of the Vigar, and he covers his eyes with his hand and also blocks the ability to move normally. Now Yi Tian could calmly finish off the bully. However, he managed to break free from the hold and even throw Zhang over himself. It turned out that she was still capable of something, and the guy was a little hasty. After this, the hero got really angry. It's okay when they both try to kill him, but when they touch people dear to him, then the jokes end. Yi Tian concentrates a huge amount of his spiritual energy into his right fist, and then punches his opponent in the stomach with all his might. The attack was incredibly powerful, causing the man to fly back several meters, blood flowing from his mouth, and it was unclear whether he was alive or not. And the guy immediately after that turned around and looked at the second hooligan. With his whole appearance, he made it clear that this enemy of his would be next. Lu Yu was so scared at this point that he lost the power of speech, and for several seconds he simply repeated the same letter in an attempt to say something. After a few seconds, he finally came to his senses and fell to his knees. The man loudly asked for forgiveness and begged him to have mercy. The hero agrees, but on the condition that the bully takes his accomplice and they leave this dorm together forever, and they should never return. This decision completely satisfied the attacker, and he once again thanked the guy for pardoning him. After this, the man takes his beaten accomplice and walks away. Now it can be said with confidence that these two will never bother them again. The next morning, Fan Miao and her friend were out for a morning jog. The sun was already quite high, so it was getting a little hot. Because of this, one of the girls says that she is very tired. She has no strength left at all. She needs to take a break right now. Feng Miao pointed out that she herself wanted to start running in the mornings to lose weight, but her friend replied that she would simply eat less today. Well, then the girl with dark hair will eat a couple of buns for dinner, but the second one won't be able to afford it if she gives up on her idea right now. At some point, the schoolgirls notice Yi Tian. He was also running, and for better effect, the hero had tied weights to his legs. Feng Miao was surprised at what her friend was doing here. From his appearance, you couldn't tell that he was a fan of something like this. Quite the opposite. Her friend knew about the story with the groom, so she noticed how cute this guy was. Not only handsome, but also loved to play sports. To this she was told that in fact there was nothing between them. But the girl with blonde hair thought that her friend was simply shy. And if this is not the case, then perhaps Fang Miao will give up such a handsome man to her best friend, a proposal the dark-haired girl flatly refused. The friends noticed that the hero looked very tired. His whole face was covered in sweat, and he was breathing heavily. Fan Miao recommended that he rest. Was he really not taking care of himself at all? As soon as the guy noticed them, something bad happened to his body. He felt a strong pain in his chest. With each passing second, the pain became stronger and stronger. He could hardly stay on his feet. It seemed that he was about to lose consciousness. His friend ran closer and asked what happened, whether she could somehow help Yi Tian, and what was going on with him in general. But suddenly the hero returns to his normal state, and you can't even tell that a second ago he was writhing in severe pain. Fang Miao strongly advises his friend not to forget about exercise technique. If the hero continues to run like this, he might simply die of exhaustion. The guy thanks the girl for the advice and apologizes for disturbing him. Now he needs to continue his training. In fact, he felt ill at that moment because his concentration was broken while he was cultivating. He was interrupted at the most inopportune moment. It looks like he will have to start all over again. It's good that there's always the opportunity to try again, but for this he needed to restore at least a little strength. Now, Yi Tian was passing by the construction site and suddenly an idea popped into his head. He entered the area and approached one of the workers. The The guy made up a story about being a student and his teacher asking all the students to try out real life. The man believed the hero and noted that apparently today's teachers don't even try to teach children, but immediately send them to difficult work. The builder agrees to give Ye Tian some work for half a day. They are a bit short of people today, so they will definitely find something to do. It seems that all the other workers are busy right now. Why doesn't he take on the task of carrying the bricks? In fact, the builder was a little uncomfortable, because this work was considered one of the most difficult, and he entrusted it to a schoolboy. The man asks the hero to take breaks after each approach and to be as careful as possible, as there is a risk of serious injury. But Ye Tian, to the surprise of everyone around him, easily lifted 2 huge boxes of bricks. From the outside, you wouldn't say that this guy was particularly strong. The hero did not stop for several hours. The other workers could not believe their eyes at how this schoolboy was able to complete such a volume of work. He was really good. He managed to do 3 times more work than an ordinary person. I wonder what his secret is. By the end of the day, Ye Tian had carried more material than their best employee of the month, which is enough to give him a bonus. The hero's plan was to load his body with physical exercise as much as possible, which produced good results. But this was still not enough. In order to begin cultivating the 9 transformation technique, one must bring the body to perfection. At the same time, there was a chance that after such a long time of working with bricks, he would be able to begin the first stage of cultivation. He definitely needed to try. Ye Tian noticed that the other workers were very tired from work, so he advised the guys to rest. He was quite capable of handling it himself. The men didn't immediately understand what was being discussed, but it would have been stupid to refuse. If this schoolboy wanted to do all the work for them, then so be it. After this, the hero calmly continued his work, but at one point a car drove right next to him at high speed. And she stopped right next to him. A guy with a tattoo came out of it. His name was Lao Zhou. It became clear that he was looking for some old man. There was also another man with him. They behaved very brazenly and turned everything upside down in their path. Apparently the villains did not come with good intentions. Lao Zhou turned to Ye Tian and demanded that he tell him where the elder was now, since they were about to have an important conversation. But when the hero didn't answer the bully, he in turn became indignant. It seems the brat is new here. Where is his respect for his elders? Suddenly, the guy with the tattoo swings his leg and hits the basket of bricks, apparently trying to knock the student down. However, Ye Tian did not lose his composure and reacted instantly. He hit the bully with the stick on which the material was hanging, causing the bully to fly several meters away. Lao Zhou was furious about this situation. How dare this brat hit his master? He must be tired of living. At that moment, the hero was only thinking about how lucky he was that he hadn't started training right now. Otherwise, he would have gotten very sick again. At that moment, the chief builder ran out of his office. Most likely, it was him that the guy with the tattoo was looking for. The first thing the man did was ask Ye Tian if he was okay. This student only came to work for half a day, and no one wanted him to get hurt. Everything was fine with the hero. He was only infuriated by the fact that he could not begin to properly cultivate in the direction of the 9 transformations. Lao Zhou quickly rose from the ground and ordered his assistants to immediately grab this brat and drag him here. But this turned out to be not as simple a task as it might have seemed at first glance. The schoolboy turned out to be a surprisingly capable and strong fighter, who was able to deal with a crowd of hooligans in just a few seconds. Soon all his enemies were lying on the ground and begging for mercy. The main builder didn't know what to do. The guy with the tattoo was a very influential person, and this student caused such a mess here. The man couldn't think of anything better to do than tell the story that Ye Tian was actually his relative and had come to help for just one day. However, Lao Zhou didn't care at all why he should care about someone's relatives, so he kicked the builder, and the bully wasn't going to stop there. He immediately ran up to the man lying on the ground and tried to hit him with his fist. Luckily, Ye Tian manages to stop the villain. He blocked the tattooed guy's blow with his palm, but it was too much. This made Lao Zhou even more angry. But the chief builder continued to calm him down and assured him that he was an ordinary student who worked for free. But this interested the hooligan. It means this guy doesn't even work here, in which case he is ready to invite such a capable fighter to his gang. The guy with the tattoo was willing to pay him 8,000 yuan a month. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. Come on, this is your chance. The chief builder calmed down a little. Apparently this situation would not worsen further, and now Lao Zhou would finally do what he came for. As it turns out, today is the last day of the month, which means payday has arrived. The workers were very happy when they heard from you. They worked so hard that they even managed to forget what day it was. However, the boss only gave his subordinates 10,000 yuan, which would only be enough to pay 2 people's salaries, citing difficulties in the company. The man approached Lao Zhou and tried to convey to him that everyone now really needs money to feed their families, but these funds are not enough.
One of the workers also reminded the guy with the tattoo that they actually signed an employment contract, which specified a monthly rate.
Thus, the boss violated the terms of the contract, and now everyone present had grounds to file a lawsuit. Lao Zhou didn't even want to hear about it, so he kicked the man with all his might. If they continued to behave like this, they would not get another penny. Besides, at the moment the construction is not even half finished, and in general the guy with the tattoo is too kind to them because he at least gave them some money. If any of them want to argue with him about something, then please. But they should understand that after this, they will not be able to continue their peaceful life. After this, the boss left, and now all the workers found themselves in a very difficult situation. There was no longer any sign of wages. Of course, everyone needs money. Some had a pregnant bride who was about to give birth, and others had a daughter who entered college. This Lao Zhou is simply an evil thief who doesn't consider workers to be normal people and never misses an opportunity to humiliate someone. One man got very angry because of this. The others immediately began to calm him down. He should not do stupid things. The chief builder advises Ye Tian to go home quickly. If the boss sees him again, he won't let him go so easily. At that moment, the hero thought that if he had even half of his previous strength, these freaks would not have lived to see dawn. At this time, the hooligans were driving in their car and discussing how this fool dared to argue with their boss. Was he really so stupid that he would argue with the hand that feeds him? Apparently that worker thought he was in a fairy tale where everyone gets what they deserve. When the construction is finally finished, they will punish that upstart properly. As for that contract, we can simply pretend that it never existed. The main builder was a stupid old man. He would never dare to go to court. Then the bandits discussed where they would drink that evening. One of them really wanted to go to a certain place. Apparently he had caught the eye of some beauty there. However, the guy with the tattoo at one point thought that the hero's name seemed somehow familiar to him. Had he really heard it before? Lao Zhou suddenly remembered the letter Ting sent him last night. The high school student ordered to eliminate Ye Tian as soon as possible. After this, the gang leader looked again at the photographs that were sent to him, after which all his doubts finally disappeared. So he ordered the driver to stop immediately and go back to the construction site. It turns out they still had some business to do there. It was imperative to take advantage of this opportunity because who knows when they would have the chance to meet him again. Meanwhile, the client was having fun in an expensive club with several girls. His exciting activity was interrupted by a phone call. Lao Zhou informed him that he had already located his target. This student was currently at one of the construction sites for which he was responsible. Since things have turned out this way, Tin orders everything to be carried out immediately. The hero must not live until tomorrow morning. The bandit needs to do everything quickly. As it turns out, the guy with the tattoo is quite afraid of his boss. He even almost dropped his phone when he raised his voice a little. That's why Lao Zhou promises to do everything as soon as possible. Ting will soon receive great news from him. He had no chance to make a mistake. After this, the bandit began to think about how it would be easiest for him to eliminate his target because the matter was very serious. He also became curious about what it was about an ordinary student that upset his boss so much at first. The guy with the tattoo didn't even expect that he would have to kill Ye Tian. Meanwhile, the hero wanted to find a way to help these visiting workers, because these people were suffering greatly and really needed money. Moreover, they were still very kind right now. One of them was inviting Ye Tian to have dinner with them. Their elder had just prepared some food. The guy happily agreed. A little something to eat wouldn't hurt. But suddenly they were all alarmed by a sound coming from behind. At that moment, everyone turned around sharply and saw a very strange picture. A truck was driving straight towards them at great speed. It turned out to be Lao Zhou and his accomplices. He didn't want to bother too much and decided to simply cause an accident involving the hero. One of the workers rushed to help Ye Tian. The man did not understand the whole situation, so the guy needed to act quickly. These people could get hurt. The hero pushes 2 workers aside and is left alone against a car that was driving towards him at great speed. In fact, this was a great opportunity to overcome the limits of this body. If everything went well after the accident, Ye Tian would be able to enter the first stage of cultivation. At one point, a minibus crashed into a pedestrian at high speed. The speed was so high that an ordinary person would not have survived something like that. Because of this, the hero's body flew several meters away, and now he felt that he had finally reached the first stage of 9 transformations. After what they saw, the rest of the workers finally lose their nerve. They run to the car and get ready to avenge the guy. From Ye Tian's appearance, one could confidently say that he had left this world. From the outside, it looked very sad. After all, He could have been the most ordinary guy who worked on a construction site, and now he is destined to die at such a young age. Now they simply have to take revenge on their boss for such an act. This time Lao Zhou will not get away with it. This is too much. The crowd picked up stones and bricks to knock out the windows of the truck. If they think they can escape, they are very much mistaken. These bandits haven't even fully realized what they've done yet, because just a few minutes ago, another person died because of them. The driver who was in the car at that moment was very afraid for his life. The man began frantically searching for something on his phone. In fact, Yi Tian was not dead. Right now, he was in his subconscious and trying to move to a new stage of his spiritual development. At this moment, he couldn't believe his luck. He managed to acquire the legendary energy of chaos. Ancient legends said that such energy is a unique force from ancient times. It is purer and stronger than even in the divine dimension. This ability allowed the hero to strengthen every element in his body several times over. But first of all, he needed to take care of his bones. The ancient gods and demons used to have such power. It is said that in ancient times, before the creation of the earth and heavens, there were 100 demons and 100 gods. Eventually, one of them killed all the others. It was the strongest who invented this type of energy. The guy finally reached the first stage of 9 transformations, and now it will not be difficult for him to punish the villains. Thanks to his newly acquired power, the boy's physical body began to heal at some point, and all the wounds and abrasions on his body instantly disappeared. At one point, Lao Zhou got out of the car and asked the crowd what they were doing. How dare these people create problems for him again? The chief builder was shocked by such impudence. This bandit at least understands what his driver just did. Because of him, a young man died. The man demanded an explanation from the guy with the tattoo, but the villain saw no need to answer to these beggars. The schoolboy himself was to blame for standing in the wrong place. Apparently, this old man needs to have everything explained to him in plain English. In fact, his life is now worth less than their car, so they should first calculate the damage to the truck. After hearing this, the chief builder could no longer control his anger. This bastard had completely driven the man crazy. Now he didn't care how many connections this bandit had. However, Lao Zhou himself was not at all afraid, and was fully prepared for a fight. This old fool talks too much. He should be taught a good lesson. To do this, the bandit took a stick from the ground and severely beat the chief builder. From the face of the scoundrel, one could understand that he really enjoyed taking advantage of his position. As a result, the man was seriously injured. This abuse continued for quite a long time. This villain was truly a monster. No one in the crowd dared to intervene. Each worker understood that if they took the initiative, the situation would become even worse. For now, it was better to simply accept it. At some point, the guy with the tattoo got tired of beating up the poor man and proudly declared that everyone else should fill out this picture as best they can, just like everyone who doesn't respect him would do. And after this, the bully decides to deliver his final blow with an iron bar, but there was still someone present who had enough courage to intervene. The man moved so fast that a huge wall of dust rose into the air, and Lao Zhou didn't even understand at first what had just happened. As it turned out, it was Ye Tian who somehow managed to grab the villain's improvised weapon. Now the guy had a clear advantage. At first, everyone around couldn't believe their eyes. How a simple schoolboy managed to survive such a terrible accident, and even move like that. Some were even frightened by this picture. In fact, it might have seemed that in front of them was not an ordinary person, but some kind of deity from the ancient world. But the vast majority soon came to their senses, and people began to sincerely rejoice that the hero had somehow managed to stay alive. Lao Zhou, in turn, was very angry. This brat was causing too much trouble. If the accident didn't kill him, they would kick him to death themselves. The gang leader orders his men to grab the guy right now and teach him a lesson. This idiot fully deserves this treatment. They don't need to restrain themselves. Soon Ye Tian found himself completely surrounded by enemies, but the hero looked quite confident. Had he really managed to achieve such strength that would allow him to win now? The builders couldn't believe that this monster was so horrible that he would deliberately take a person's life. The men also shouted at the guy and asked him to run away. However, Yi Tian had no intention of leaving. These bandits would not escape him now. Missing such an opportunity to punish the bad people would be simply a waste. Lao Zhou was beaming with happiness. He thought that after this, everyone would find out what a serious person he was. The villain was counting on enormous popularity in criminal circles. Unfortunately for him, the hero had no intention of dying here now. Moreover, he was now incredibly strong after gaining new abilities and achieving the first stage of a unique technique. Now his entire body was covered in bright blue lightning, and the enemies surrounded the guy from all sides. The numerical advantage was clearly not on his side. But Ye Tian remained confident in his strength. He easily managed to dodge the attack. Such slow lunges would never reach him. At the same time, the guy simultaneously launched a counterattack. With one powerful, sweeping movement, he hit all the bandits at once. Because of this, the enemy scattered in different directions. Their leader stood a little further away and could not believe his eyes. Where did this snot-nosed brat get his strength from? Now, Lao Zhou didn't know what to do next. All his men were beaten to the point that they couldn't get back on their feet. The situation was simply terrible for him. Suddenly, one of the men was finally able to get up, his whole body shaking with pain. He approached his boss and asked for help. At that moment, the guy with the tattoo was very scared. It seemed to him that his subordinate had gone crazy. Could the hero's power have really affected him that much? The bandit didn't last even a few minutes on his feet. After walking a couple of meters, he lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Lao Zhou was finally convinced of Ye Tian's strength. His power was on a completely different level. Most likely no living person could resist him. The builders also didn't fully comprehend what they had just seen. Each of them believed that the student had died, since after such an accident there was practically no chance of survival. The hero meanwhile turned to Lao Zhou and asked if he really didn't know how to fight, but the bully in turn ordered him to stand still. However, the guy was not going to follow the orders of this idiot. Now that he dealt with his guard dogs, it was his turn. After the guy with the tattoo heard these words, he lost the power of speech. His whole body was pierced by the strongest fear. Was he really going to die now? The bandit felt a strong sense of hopelessness, because he realized that his strength would in any case be insufficient to offer resistance. The guy kicked his enemy in the face. That should be enough for now. This asshole needs to come to his senses a little. Because of this, Lao Zhou flew back several meters. The blow was incredibly strong. In any case, he deserved it. The hero thought the guy with the tattoo wanted to tell him something, but he couldn't hear anything because of the strong wind. He should repeat it. But because of the missed attack, the bandit could not come to his senses. He was simply shaking in pain, and blood began to flow from his mouth. Now he could not even get to his feet. This guy is incredibly cruel. If the bully doesn't admit defeat now, then there's a high probability that he won't be able to leave here alive. Ye Tian, in turn, had no intention of stopping because Lao Zhou was truly a terrible person. People like him needed to be taught normal behavior. The guy with the tattoo couldn't put up any resistance at all, so they promised to compensate the hero for the accident, offering 200,000. The workers were becoming more and more surprised with each passing minute. Could it really be that this was the same schoolboy they had seen during the day when he had managed to turn into such a cruel monster? Ye Tian didn't pay attention to this. He turned to the bandit and agreed to accept his generous help, because the guy was very kind after all. After this, the senior builder immediately ran up to him and informed him that this money was enough to cover all expenses, and there was no longer any need to mock the bully. Ye Tian agreed, but warned Lao Zhou that all the funds had to be here today, and if he failed to fulfill this condition, he would only have himself to blame. The bandit, of course, agreed to everything. Now his main goal was to survive. He even offered the winner a cigarette, which he lit himself. Now the respected student just has to wait and smoke a cigarette, and the money will be here in a couple of hours. Literally, an hour later, one of the hooligans ran to the construction site with a backpack. He hurried as best he could and had already brought 200,000. After this, the villain asks if they can leave, and the guy says that he will not count the money, but if there's not enough here, it will not be difficult for him to find it. Lao Zhou finally thanked the generous student once again for having mercy on him. It was very polite of him. After that, the whole gang was finally about to leave. Today, all these hooligans had possibly the worst day of their lives. However, that's not all. Ye Tian actually didn't clarify one thing, so the villains couldn't just run away yet. As it turns out, the hero forgot to say that he would also confiscate their truck, which is why the gang would have to go on foot. The hooligans had to agree to this too. They all suffered incredible humiliation today. Lao Zhou was furious. This is not the end yet. The guy picked up a bag of money and wanted to give it to the chief builder. These funds in the car should be used as wages for the workers. However, the man did not want to agree to this. They could not take all of this, because the hero suffered more than anyone else at the hands of these scoundrels. Ye Tian didn't want to argue about this issue and simply handed the bag into the hands of the chief builder. He had originally started this for the sake of ordinary people. At the same time, it was important to remember that the guy with the tattoo would not just accept this whole situation. They would need to lie low for a while. Now, Ye Tian was already in the early stages of the 9 transformations of demons and gods. His thinking was gradually changing, which was why he had fits of cruelty. The news that some construction workers had fled their work site quickly reached Lao Zhou, and the men simply disappeared. The gang leader was very angry about this. He had already suffered greatly today, and now these people had escaped. They needed to be brought back immediately. Although the hero has only just entered the first stage of 9 transformations, he has already acquired unique abilities. Now he must find a suitable place to test his new powers. To do this, it was necessary to get away from prying eyes, and the forest outside the city was perfect for this. There was just a good tree there. Yi Tian poured a huge amount of his spiritual energy into his left fist. This power could be seen even with the naked eye. And after that, he hit the tree trunk with all his might, causing it to shatter into small pieces, leaving no trace of the huge oak. The attack was so powerful that it destroyed everything in its path within a radius of several tens of meters, and huge walls of smoke rose up around it. The guy was happy when he saw all this, although he understood that he had become much stronger, but such power was beyond all expectations. The awakening of the 9 transformations of demons and gods was astounding. The hero could not even imagine that so much dust would remain after the blow. But this situation had a downside. Now he was all dirty. He needed to find a place where he would be able to bathe. There just happened to be a clean lake nearby with normal water temperature, and by pure chance Fan Miao was swimming there. The girl came here hoping that she would be able to calmly freshen up and be alone with herself, but suddenly she heard some noise nearby. The beauty did not expect to see her friend here. How did he end up here? And the guy, without suspecting anything, was glad that he found such a good place. As it turned out, these two were not alone here. There were also 2 strangers nearby, and from their conversation it became clear that they were looking for someone. One of them told the other that he saw men's clothing near the lake. They should definitely go there and check. Maybe they will find answers there. Meanwhile, Ye Tian climbed into the water and calmly washed himself off the dust, but suddenly he got the feeling that he was not alone here. A hand suddenly reached out to him from the water. It turned out to be his friend. She ordered the guy to behave quietly and not to turn around because they were not alone here. Someone was coming here right now. The couple hid behind a rock, while 2 strangers walked nearby and tried to find the person who owned the clothes lying nearby. The hero couldn't understand what was going on here and asked his friend about it. She tried to explain that she was just swimming here and had no idea who these people were. Suddenly, one of the strangers heard their conversation and loudly asked if there was anyone there too. It seemed that they had been exposed and the couple needed to find a way out of the situation. Out of surprise, Yi Tian accidentally placed his palm on Fang Miao's leg, causing the beauty to be extremely embarrassed at what this idiot was doing. The 2 guys already guessed that someone was hiding behind the rock. If he wanted to survive, he should come out of his hiding place right now. At that very moment, the girl became furious at what her friend had done. She was ready to kill this pervert right then and there. As a result, the hero found himself in a very awkward situation. He was wearing only funny underwear, and strangers were standing in front of him. Yi Tian tried to play dumb and asked the guy again if they had just spoken to him, but he hadn't quite heard correctly. As it turned out, the 2 strangers were actually looking for some wounded girl here. She was their original target. The hero immediately understood who they were talking about. At that moment, he thought about what to do: save her or let everything slide. As a result, the guy decides to help his friend and tries to deceive the pursuers. It seemed to him that some woman was running in that direction. Of course, this plan was far from ideal, but in such a hopeless situation, there was no time to come up with something better. The strangers weren't particularly smart, so they completely trusted Ye Tian, and now they were about to set off to search deep into the forest. But they still became curious as to why such a brat was here at such a late hour, and whether he wanted to go with them. The hero answered them that everything was fine with him. He knew this area very well, and it was not the first time he had come here to swim. They should not worry. Eventually, his pursuers left him alone and went about their business. But this schoolboy seemed too strange to them. They had a premonition that told them that the girl they were looking for was somewhere nearby, whether that kid had lied to them or not.
Yi Tian, after making sure that the strangers had run far enough away, called his friend. Now she could relax a little and go outside.
However, Fan Miao did not answer anything. The guy approached the place where she was last time, but she was not there. Did the beauty really go to the bottom? This was indeed the case. Now she needed to be saved as quickly as possible. The hero immediately jumped into the lake and dove under the water. Fang Miao was already at great depth. She had been lying here for several minutes. It was safe to say that her life was in danger. But when the guy swam closer, he noticed that air bubbles were still coming out of her mouth, which meant that there was still hope.
Yi Tian pulled his friend out of the water as quickly as he could. Unfortunately, the beauty was unconscious. Something needed to be done urgently.
To do this, the hero put Fan Miao on the ground. He was a little embarrassed because she was only wearing a shirt. Apparently the girl did not expect to meet someone in such a place. But now there was no time for that. The beauty still hadn't come to. She needed to be given artificial respiration urgently, and as quickly as possible. Ye Tian had never done this before, so he was a little nervous. The hero leaned over and approached his girlfriend. Suddenly, as soon as there was a distance of a few centimeters between their lips, the girl suddenly woke up. It seemed to her that she was being molested. That's why she suddenly jumps up and slaps her friend's face with all her might, indicating what this pervert was about to do to her. The guy tried to calm the beauty down and made excuses. Nothing like that had ever occurred to him, and besides, he knew how to heal her. But Fang Miao didn't believe him and continued to panic. He was clearly abnormal. She would never believe such a fool. To somehow confirm the truth of his words, the hero fully describes all the problems that haunted his girlfriend for many years. Now the girl calmed down a little. Could this weirdo really know about her problem and even be able to cure this disease? But she still had some doubts about her friend. She warned him that if he did something strange, he would not leave here safe and sound. Fortunately, after just a few minutes, the beauty had no doubts left. Yi Tian sincerely wanted to help her. Fang Miao had no idea that he practiced such methods. The girl has been interested in this kind of thing since childhood, and because of her illness, she had to delve into a variety of medical methods, because conventional doctors couldn't help. Fang Miao asked who her friend's teacher was, but the hero replied that if she wanted to know something about others, she should first tell him about herself. The beauty did not want to answer such questions, but only noted that she felt how her spiritual energy was becoming more and more aggressive with every second.
Yi Tian explained to his acquaintance that he had to transfer his power into her body because the aura of this world was too weak.
The girl was very lucky that the guy already had a special aura of chaos. Only it can help in such a situation, but at some point, something strange happens. The hero suddenly fell silent. He could not understand why he could not tune the flows in his girlfriend's body. His speech abruptly stopped. Fang Miao was a little panicked by this, and the guy asked her to keep quiet. Now he had to use the golden needles to fix the situation. Suddenly, they were interrupted by their pursuers. They wandered through the forest for several hours in search of their target, but found nothing. They had no choice but to return back. The situation has become very unfavorable, because when a cultivator is busy healing another person, he is unable to fight, so he needs to come up with some kind of plan. To begin with, Yi Tian asked the strangers why they returned so quickly, and he made it clear to them that the one they were looking for had fled into the forest. But this time, the pursuers no longer believed such nonsense. Do these schoolchildren really consider themselves the smartest? Are they simply stalling for time before the moment of their death? Immediately after this, one of the villains rushed with his fists at the guy and his girlfriend, but fortunately they managed to dodge. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the hero spent a lot of energy healing his friend. He needs to find a way to replenish it. Fang Miao asks the guy to leave her and run away, because they are both in great danger now. He should not risk his life for her. Yi Tian didn't want to hear about such stupid things. He had enough strength to get out of this mess. It's just that now the healing process is at a critical stage and they can't interrupt it. Meanwhile, the pursuers ran after them. First of all, they wanted to deal with this brat. He had to die first. The hero stood motionless at this time. His girlfriend could not understand what was on his mind. Was the plan really to save as much energy as possible? In fact, there were literally just a few seconds left until the end of the process of transferring spiritual power, which is why it was impossible to be distracted. But now that Yi Tian had the opportunity to move freely, he easily managed to block the villain's attack with his palm. After this, he kicked the attacker in the stomach with all his might, causing the hooligan to fly several meters in the other direction. Now, Yi Tian could indulge himself in anything. It seemed like today he needed to deal with a couple of idiots who were meddling in something that wasn't their business. Fang Miao became more and more surprised by her friend's behavior, why such spontaneous decisions constantly came to his mind. But the hero was busy with something else right now, and he didn't have time to answer stupid questions. After all, he had to protect not only himself, but also his girlfriend. Fortunately, thanks to the unique energy of chaos, he had no trouble resisting these two pursuers. When one of them saw the technique Yi Tian possessed, he was simply shocked. Could this really be the man about whom legends are made? In the ancient tales of this world, it was said that a second son would soon return. This being would arrive from the dimension of Niuhu. The guy actually had no idea what these villains were talking about, but he now had an excellent reason to get rid of them as quickly as possible. But the beauty knew this story very well. Apparently, cultivation methods were also present in this world, but they were arranged a little differently. The hero wants to deal with his pursuers as quickly as possible, so he hits one of them with all his might with a hand filled with chaos energy. After this, the strangers were finally convinced that it was better to run away from here as quickly as possible, because such an enemy was definitely no match for them. The girl asked her friend if he would really just let these freaks go. Maybe it would be better to punish them somehow. Yi Tian was currently healing her, so a couple of pursuers didn't matter now. The beauty agreed with this. Now, the guy could finally complete the process of treating Fan Miao. He took out his needles and began to stick them one by one into special points. His girlfriend was very surprised by this method. Who could teach the hero such an impeccable technique, given that his energy is incredibly powerful? The process took a little longer, but the boys ended up sitting there meditating for several dozen minutes, unable to be distracted for even a second. At some point, a large beam of bright blue light fell from the sky directly onto the girl, which meant that her treatment was completely complete. Now the beauty could see this for herself. All she needed to do was stand up and feel the changes in her physical body. In fact, there was no need to even stand up. Fang Miao immediately felt her pain instantly evaporate. Could it be that her suffering was finally over? She was incredibly happy and grateful to her savior. How lucky she was to meet this guy. He did what the best doctors could not do for several years. Now they needed to pack their things as quickly as possible after all. The picture looked rather strange, and it was deep night outside. Fang Miao felt a little ashamed of her behavior. She shouldn't have treated Ye Tian like that after all. He turned out to be a very kind person. After that, the girl immediately got dressed because it was getting chilly outside. Suddenly the guy noticed her hairpin. It was a very unusual thing. The hero asked his friend where she bought it, and it turned out that she got this decoration in a very unusual way. Fan Miao was born with this hairpin. In fact, this thing was from another world, which was where Ye Tian used to live. Or perhaps it was all just a coincidence. The guy was also interested in the question about New Hu's measurement. Fan Miao, in turn, thought that her friend was just making fun of her, because it was impossible to achieve such a level of strength without knowing such basic things. He should stop fooling around. It's simply impossible to have such abilities as his and not know anything about the laws of this world. However, the hero insisted that he really didn't understand anything and asked to tell him in more detail how difficult it was to achieve such a level of power as an ordinary mortal. He didn't know what level of cultivation was in this world, so now he should listen carefully to his friend and see what she had to say. It turns out that there are only 4 classes of martial arts in this dimension, each with its own distinctive features. The worst are the representatives of the 4th class, which involves using only hands and feet for fighting. In martial arts, they are not even considered beginners. Next came the 3rd class. Although such fighters can sense the existence of the true energy of the earth, they are not given the ability to feel it fully. Only now did Ye Tian realize that all those he had fought with up until this point were precisely at the 3rd level of cultivation. People who reached the 2nd class were not significantly different from the previous ones in terms of strength. They were simply given the ability to better sense the energy of the earth. But once the 2nd and 3rd rank fighters find the way to reach the Hoqian dimension, they become 1st class representatives. The guy was a little amused by the fact that his girlfriend knew so much about the structure of forces in this world, but at the same time she was unable to fight off 2 weaklings on her own. Fang Miao was a little embarrassed and tried to justify herself. In fact, she had already reached the Lingxi dimension. It was just that her illness was really hindering her. At this moment, the hero realizes that there are also some other dimensions. In fact, there were 3 of them. All of them also differed in strength. How could Ye Tian not know this if he had already managed to reach the strongest dimension at such a young age? He was clearly pretending. The guy decides to play along with his girlfriend and says that in fact he knew all this, but just decided to joke a little. Suddenly they heard some noise next to them. It turned out to be the girl's relatives, and they were now walking straight here. Fang Miao didn't want her parents to notice her in the company of some stranger, so she tried to run away, but the hero grabbed her friend by the hand.
Yi Tian asked her if she was really that afraid of her relatives. They don't bite, she should grow up a little.
But the girl asked to let go of his hand, because if she was noticed in such a situation, she would be severely punished. She really didn't want to sit at home for a whole month again. At some point, the guy realized that he really looked pretty stupid, so he let the beauty go, and she also persistently asks him not to follow her. After this, the hero also got dressed and thought about how this hairpin ended up with his girlfriend for a reason. It was clearly destined by fate. Now he wanted to get to Fan Miao's home. Perhaps he will be able to find some more signs there. After all, he still has not managed to find the reason for his appearance in this world. Ye Tian also recalls the last words he heard from his mentor. Apparently they were somehow connected to this situation. The old man said that his disciple had to collect 12 flower artifacts and return to heaven, otherwise the boy would be destined to lose himself forever. Although this student inherited incredible talent, he is destined for a terrible death. Unfortunately, fate cannot be changed. After this, the old man coughed very hard. It became clear that right now he was leaving this world. The last thing he said was an instruction for the hero. Ye Tian had to accept his fate, or he would never be able to escape. Now he realized that he had managed to find one of the flower artifacts. But where were the rest? This means he needs to find all the artifacts. Only then will he be able to fulfill his destiny and return to his world. This was destined from the very beginning. Now the guy went to his room. Suddenly he had a bad feeling because every time he comes back here, something bad happens. As it turned out, this time was no exception. His friend was sitting tied to a chair with socks in his mouth, and he had been beaten very badly.
The hero was in extreme shock at what had happened here, who dared to raise a hand against someone dear to him. He would definitely pay for it.
Yi Tian immediately untied Zhang and tried to find out who had a hand in this, whether their former roommates had returned again for revenge. Everything turned out to be exactly like that. Yesterday, these two, along with a group of people, burst into the room and looked for him. But the friend endured all the humiliation and did not say anything. The guy immediately uses his spiritual energy to heal his comrade. He had to go through a lot how these freaks laughed at coming here again. The hero promises his brother that he will definitely make these villains pay a price 10 times greater than what they did to him today. The next day, the friends were walking along the road to the university. Zhang still feared that their former roommates were hiding somewhere nearby and could attack. Yi Tian advised his comrade not to worry so much. When they were together, no one would dare to lay a finger on him. At that moment, everyone around them was whispering among themselves. The school children were surprised at how such a weakling as a hero could become so tall. The guy heard this and just smiled. These ordinary people can measure everything only by appearance. After all, they are incredibly limited. At some point, Zhang thought that his friend had really become much more handsome and smarter. It felt like he was a completely different person. Yi Tian noticed his comrade's anxiety and asked what the reason was. As it turned out, the guy felt worthless compared to the hero. He immediately began to reassure Zhang that he shouldn't worry about it. They were brothers after all, and Yi Tian respected his friend very much. To lighten the mood a bit, the guys went to the nearest cafe. The students hadn't eaten anything since yesterday, so a snack wouldn't hurt. The hero called the waiter and asked him to take his order. It turned out to be quite unusual. The guy wanted to be brought a whole 100 buns. At first, the worker didn't believe what he heard and asked again, "Is this man really going to eat that much food at once?"
Zhang asked his friend to cool down a bit, since he didn't have the money to pay for half of such an order, but Yi Tian was ready to pay for the food himself.
But still, this amount of food is too much. He will hardly be able to eat that much, but 20 buns for each will be more than enough. However, Yi Tian continued to stand his ground. If his friend didn't want to eat half, then he was quite capable of eating as much as was left. The waiter asked again if these students were joking. No one had ever ordered 100 buns from them before. Zhang realized that his attempts to dissuade the hero had been unsuccessful. It looked like they were about to receive a huge amount of food. The worker turned to the cook and ordered him to bring all the buns they currently had, because a schoolboy had come to them who wanted to eat 100 of them at once. Soon the food was on the table. In fact, there was so much of it that it barely fit. Could Yi Tian really fit so much? Suddenly, a man appeared among the visitors and offered to bet with the others on whether this student could eat such a portion. Each of those present could bet any amount up to 10,000 yuan. If the hero ate 100 buns, the man would increase the bet fivefold. Visitors thought they could win easy money now, but this bettor shouldn't have kept his mouth shut. The outcome of this forecast was obvious. The man insistently asked Yi Tian to wait a little with the meal, since the people had not yet decided on their inserts. However, the guy didn't pay attention to this and just ate calmly. He even offered his friend to make a bet, but Zhang assured his brother that he didn't have to eat all this for the crowd's entertainment. The hero, in turn, was completely confident in his abilities. The guy can't make a decision for a few minutes. This person treated him very well. Now he just needs to believe in him. Eventually, Zhang decides that if Yi Tian doesn't manage to eat all the food in the allotted time, he will have the opportunity to help. The bettor didn't give up on this idea. This way, he will definitely be able to attract more people who are willing to risk their money. Suddenly, a schoolboy sitting at the next table announced that he was ready to make his bet. He was sure that the hero would not cope with this task. This student was ready to bet as much as 10,000. The man didn't even expect that there would be anyone here willing to risk such funds. The purple-haired guy was simply afraid that these poor people wouldn't be able to make a normal bet, so he decided to join. Yi Tian asked his friend how much money he had with him now. As it turned out, it was very little, somewhere around 5,000. The hero advises Zhang to bet all these funds on the fact that he will manage to eat all 100 buns. Very soon they will collect money from all these fools. The guy trusted his brother completely, so he didn't hesitate to announce that he wanted to place his bet. The man ordered his assistant to write everything down so that later, when these brats lost, they wouldn't try to play dumb. In a few minutes, everyone who wanted to had already made their choice, and if there was still anyone left, they should hurry, because everything was starting right now. The man who organized all this thought that if you don't want to earn such easy money, you're even more stupid than these two schoolchildren. In the end, absolutely everyone except Yi Tian's friend bet against him. This bunch of fools didn't even realize how wrong they were now. Suddenly, the bettor notices the incredible confidence that emanated from the guy. Why is this fool behaving like this? Does he really hope for anything? The schoolboy, in turn, has already figured out how to spend the money he won. Since he bet the most, he will ultimately earn quite a lot. Soon the hero began his meal. Everyone around was very surprised at how he managed to stuff so much food into himself with such ease. Did he really have a bottomless stomach? The purple-haired boy noticed that Yi Tian had slowed down a bit. It seemed like his stomach was already full. He had already managed to eat more than 40 pieces. But in fact, the hero felt great. He just didn't expect that this immortal body could so stupidly choke on a fried bun. At some point, the rich schoolboy began to get nervous, because there was less and less food on the table with each passing minute. And because of this, he and Zhang began to argue.
Yi Tian asked him not to disturb him. What was the point of this rush? He had just started his lunch. It was impolite to disturb him.
In response, the schoolboy laughed when he heard such words. Apparently, this idiot was going to pretend to be sick in the head when he didn't manage to eat everything. But suddenly, his laughter turned to alarm, because the hero got up from the table and wanted to talk to him about something. Yi Tian's expression showed that he was completely confident in his abilities, and he wanted to ask the purple-haired boy what he would do when he lost. He decided to raise the stakes, and replied that if he lost, he was ready to kneel and lick the winner's shoes until they were perfectly clean. The hero was delighted when he heard this. It is worth noting that no one forced this fool to speak. Right now, he will have to do everything he promised. This brat, due to his stupidity, thought that someone like Yi Tian could lose. Now, all that remains is to count the number of times he will lose. The man noticed that the boy was serious about eating the remaining 60 buns, but he was sure that it was beyond the capabilities of an ordinary person. It's also worth noting that the hero's boots are now very dirty. If he wins, the rich schoolboy will have a hard time.
This student got very carried away when he raised the stakes. Now he needs to stop being so careless and think with his head.
The bettor suggests that he talk to Yi Tian and cancel this humiliating condition, since there will be enough money, but the guy with purple hair is not going to do this. By the way, his name was Cheo, and he doesn't tend to go back on his word. Instead, he confirms once again that if he loses, he's ready to lick someone else's shoes. Zhang was afraid that this situation was going too far. But his brother told him not to worry, as this was a great opportunity to get his shoes cleaned. The rich schoolboy was very angry about this, so he ordered the terms of the bet to be fulfilled faster. He was already tired of waiting for so long. After a while, all the visitors were shocked. This guy actually managed to eat almost all the buns. Because of this, Qiao became furious and could not control his anger. He used his foot to overturn the table, on which there was still some food left. After this, the situation became unclear. Now, in order to win the argument, the hero needs to pick up the buns from the floor, and this is very disgusting. Zhang wanted to immediately put the upstart in his place, which he was allowing himself to do. But his comrade explained that this was not necessary. Everything was much simpler. Yi Tian simply asked the waiter to bring him 2 more buns, since he didn't need to humiliate himself in order to win the bet. After this, no one had any doubts that the hero would fulfill his promise, and that the rich schoolboy would really lick his boots. Even the restaurant worker expressed his respect. He would never have thought that the young man was really capable of such a thing. But Yi Tian simply had to do it, because his shoes were waiting for someone who was obliged to clean them until they were shiny. Visitors noticed that Chao was trying to escape, which is understandable, because who would want to humiliate themselves in front of someone everyone considers a weakling? But to his great regret, he was unable to escape. The hero immediately stopped any attempts of this kind. Where was he going? The man who started all this tried to smooth things over. Perhaps the hero would simply forget about everything, and in return they would give him even more money. At the same time, Qiao tried to look tough and ordered him to let go, because his parents were very rich. If this continued, Yi Tian would regret it. This made the guy angry that this worthless mortal could allow himself to talk to him like that after he had miserably lost an honest bet. He throws the schoolboy to the ground with all his might and thanks to his spiritual energy. This blow is incredibly powerful. From this, Qiao was bleeding from his mouth. It seemed like he felt severe pain throughout his body, and the hero, in turn, took a chair and sat closer to him. Now the rich schoolboy is obliged to lick his shoes to the same condition they were in when they left the store. After all, no one forced him to do so. And if you promise something, you are obliged to fulfill it. These were the basic life principles that Yi Tian adhered to since childhood. But this guy was too proud. He still couldn't come to terms with his defeat. How dare this beggar treat him like that? The hero is tired of this chatter, so he decides to properly teach the upstart a lesson. Someone has to teach him at least some moral standards. Kiao was in great pain, his head caught between the hard floor and the leg of the man he hated with all his soul. All he could do was scream. The hero's life principles also included punishing all those who dared to harm him or people he cared about. Moreover, the guy doesn't care at all how much money such offenders have, or what status they have. They will pay in any case. At some point, several more people burst into the restaurant hall. Apparently, these were the people who were supposed to get the rich schoolboy out of the current situation. As it turned out, they were sent by Tin. The hooligans ordered everyone present to disperse immediately. They must complete the task right now. At that moment, the hero removed his foot from the loser's head. Apparently, a few more fools wanted to feel his full strength. A Kiao ordered that this bastard be immediately seized and beaten to a pulp. He simply had to get what he deserved for his actions. Yi Tian doesn't bother with them and immediately uses his chaos energy. At that moment, bright blue lightning appeared around him again. Thanks to this, he manages to deal with all the hooligans with one blow. In fact, they didn't even have a chance. In the end, several people were left completely useless. All they could do was lie on the floor and beg the guy for mercy. Several hooligans immediately rushed to their boss to help. If they screwed up now, they would be severely punished. In truth, these fools should learn one thing. They will only suffer more if they continue to pester Ye Tian. The man who initiated the argument was very surprised by the hero's abilities. Now he looked like a professional fighter. He just managed to deal with several attackers in a few seconds. He can confidently be called a wolf in sheep's clothing. However, some of the hooligans turned out to be incredibly stupid because they continued to threaten Yi Tian. Apparently, they were completely tired of living. Right now, one of them was rushing towards him with a strong desire to avenge Qiao. This fool actually had hopes for something. The hero easily blocked his incredibly slow and weak blow. The schoolboy was shocked by such power. He had never encountered anything like it before. After that, the guy broke his opponent's arm. Apparently, this weakling put all his strength into his pathetic blow, which is how he was accepted into the gang in the first place. After this, Ye Tian suggests that the bully try one trick. Everyone calls it the penguin flight. Now the schoolboy will understand everything himself. In just a few moments, the weakling flew high into the air. In fact, it was a preparation for one special blow. The hero has already invested a small portion of his chaos energy into his right arm and leg. Now he will teach this upstart some good manners. This trick is called a flying crow strike, and now everyone in the restaurant is convinced that it's better not to mess with this guy. Among them, one very pretty girl with blonde hair stood out. Her whole face turned red, and her heart began to beat faster. The beauty seemed to be enchanted by this guy. She asked everyone to move aside and let her pass closer to him. Something strange was happening to her. Her name was Qin Lan. She was one of the most beautiful students in the whole school. But what was on her mind, her behavior was very strange. Could she really have fallen in love with Yi Tian? There was no other explanation, but how could such a weakling manage to seduce such a beauty? The girl simply could not convey the feelings she was experiencing. At some point, her entire body stopped obeying her, and she kissed the hero right on the lips, while the thought of what was happening to her kept spinning in her head. At some point, the beauty finally comes to her senses. Her actions were truly stupid, because everyone at school knew that this guy was Feng Miao's fiancé. Yi Tian was a little embarrassed. This was all too strange. Could it be that a deity had just been kissed by an ordinary student? Qin Lan was very ashamed of her actions. Her whole face turned red like a tomato, and she apologized for her behavior. And after that, she extended her hand to the hero and introduced herself. In fact, she was very glad to meet her. As it turned out, Feng Miao herself was also present here. She couldn't believe her eyes because she thought that the guy was more than just a friend to her. Suddenly, the whole crowd turns its attention to her. Could such a worthless person like Ye Tian really manage to seduce two of the most beautiful girls at once? Was she also going to kiss her brother? This was too much. That was exactly what Zhang was thinking now. But as it turned out, the girl was rapidly approaching the hero not to kiss him, but to slap him across the face with all her might. For those around, the situation became completely incomprehensible. None of them could understand what was happening before their eyes. Feng Miao announced that their engagement was off. The crowd couldn't believe that the two were actually in a relationship. This idiot had a unique chance. Yi Tian was embarrassed by his girlfriend's behavior because he didn't show any initiative. This girl herself approached him. As it turned out, these two beauties are actually friends. Qin Lan tried to justify herself and said that it was all a pure coincidence. But Feng Miao didn't believe it because she did everything of her own free will, and now she and this guy have no relationship. The girl with blonde hair asked her friend for forgiveness. She really didn't want this outcome. She is very sorry. Feng Miao pretends not to care and accepts the apology. Now she wants to leave this restaurant as quickly as possible. So he grabs Qin Lan by the hand and runs away. and finally turns to the hero and tells him that from now on they must act as if they never knew each other. Yi Tian actually didn't mind this at all. Perhaps it was even for the best. At least he wouldn't have to constantly get into trouble. From Fan Miao's face, one could tell that she was a little upset about the situation. Apparently, she did have feelings after all. When the friends went outside, the girl with dark hair said that some people are really very strange. People like her, having lost something valuable, for some reason feel nothing. In fact, it is quite difficult to explain in words. This is exactly how Fang Miao felt right now. It was as if a huge black hole had formed in her heart that could not be filled by anything. Qin Lan advises her friend to change her impulsive decision. She should not break off her engagement with such a good man. But in reality, all of this was just a coincidence. In truth, the girl and Ye Tian had never really been in a relationship. To be honest, at that moment, Fang Miao was really hoping for a complete break in the relationship. Apparently, she didn't like the hero at all. It turns out that one of Tin's subordinates overheard their conversation and is now informing his boss that the brat is still alive. The rich man couldn't believe what he just heard. He had already ordered Lao Zhou to deal with this upstart as quickly as possible. Suddenly, he received a call on his second phone from the guy with the tattoos. Apparently, he just wanted to talk about this right now. Tin was happy to pick up the phone. He was very interested in listening to this idiot's excuses. Such important matters can no longer be trusted to weaklings. In the end, the rich man ordered his subordinate to come to him in person. He did not like to resolve such issues over the phone. Lao Zhou was there in just a few minutes. The guards let him in, but it turned out he needed to look around carefully. There were a lot of drunk girls lying on the floor, and it was possible to step on one of them by pure accident. The guy with the tattoo was very worried. His whole face was covered in sweat. He asked his boss how he could help him. Tin wanted to know right now the reason why the brat was still alive, why his subordinate had not completed his task. Lao Zhou tried to play dumb and pretended not to understand what was going on, but in reality he couldn't come up with a coherent excuse. This made Tin furious. How dare he lie to his elder's face? He simply had to report everything in detail. The rich man took Yi Tian's presence as a personal insult, so the student simply had to die. But the student justified himself by saying that this guy was a very strong fighter. His martial arts are at a very high level. They were unable to win even with a multiple advantage. All 20 members of the gang ended up in the hospital. Ting didn't want to listen to these excuses. He felt like Lao Zhou was just a worthless weakling. If he didn't stop acting like this, he would have to pick himself up piece by piece. But even after this, the guy with the tattoo begged to be spared such a task. The rich man had no choice but to find more experienced fighters. This made Lao Zhou very happy. But now he had to get out of here immediately. He had to look for a new job today. Meanwhile, the comrades returned to their room. Today was just a great day, because they managed to earn a whole bunch of money. The guys really wanted to count them. And they were also surprised that the man paid them every last penny. Apparently he was just scared. When they entered their home, they noticed an unusual picture. Right in the middle of the room, there was a poster that said that the hero should come to the sports ground at 9 in the evening. Yi Tian was amused by this. He was looking forward to meeting a new opponent. He enjoyed punishing scoundrels with his own hands. Soon evening came, and a huge crowd of people gathered on the site, all of them right now waiting for the guy to appear. The main one was called Tian. One of his charges was lighting a cigarette. Some doubted that this schoolboy would dare to show up. It turned out that the man with the lighter was Van. Now he looked like a little girl who was bullied in kindergarten. Be that as it may, he shouldn't think about it. Everything will be done for him anyway. Even if he doesn't show up here, they will find him. And if the gang had to waste their time looking for him, then the hero would be even worse off. But Wang still continued to doubt. After all, Yi Tian was very strong. Tian just laughed when he heard this. Now he didn't recognize this man at all. Could it be that this schoolboy humiliated him so much that now Wang is afraid of everything?
The leader thought they had no chance of defeat, and besides, the hero hadn't shown up, and there was only one last drag left on his cigarette. He was clearly delayed.
However, right at that moment the guy came. He looked quite confident and was the first to address the crowd of hooligans. It was immediately clear to him that they had all come for his soul. Apparently, Ye Tian had a bit of re-education work to do today. Tian was glad when he saw his target. This brat really came here. Now at least he wouldn't have to run after him. But the hero, in turn, asked the gang if they were really so excited about their trip to the depths of hell. The boss smiled when he heard this. Such a performance was just like his style. Apparently this schoolboy really is not bad at something. To be honest, when he looked at this guy, he saw nothing but a small and hypocritical mama's boy. Ye Tian noted that in fact he was not a son, but none other than the father of one of the members of their group. And right now the hero intends to take his stupid son back home. all this time meaning Van. This initially scared the man, but then he became very angry, and curses and calls to immediately beat up this upstart began pouring out of his mouth. By the way, they were not just a gang. As it turned out, these people were the best basketball team in the whole city. To tell the truth, the guy didn't really care what these idiots did in their free time. He simply calmed Van down with one deft blow as usual. Moreover, he didn't even have to move from his place. The hero was still standing and waiting for at least one brave man to finally approach him. Tien took this as a challenge. Now he and his brothers will give this brat a good kicking. Today he will learn where his place is. As it turned out, two girls were walking nearby. Chin Lan was once again asking for forgiveness for her actions and wanted to finally go home. Her friend replied that she wasn't really angry at all. She just wanted to walk outside a little more. It was a beautiful evening today. Suddenly they noticed that some kind of fight is happening on the school playground, and loud shouts and screams are coming from there. Fang Miao didn't really want to watch this, because what could be interesting in some children's squabbles, it was just stupidity. But at some point, the friends notice that Yi Tian is there. How does he manage to create so many problems everywhere? Is he really fighting with the basketball team this time? Chin Lan wanted to call security, but her friend stopped her, because it wouldn't harm a person like this guy. It was just a small squabble. Tian had already launched a dozen blows, but still hadn't managed to hit the target. He couldn't understand what was happening. After all, this guy managed to dodge every one of their blows, and his face remained calm throughout the entire fight. At some point, the hero gets tired of being idle and using his unique spiritual energy, sends several people flying with one blow. As a result, several hooligans scattered in different directions. Each of them was quite seriously injured. Some even had blood coming from the mouth. Only Van and the leader remained standing. The men became very scared, because they could not explain such physical strength. This guy is incredibly strong. He manages to kick people like they were rubber balls. They would never be able to handle him. Yi Tian, in turn, could not understand what was so amazing about his abilities. Right at that moment, a villain with a pipe in his hands approached him from behind. Suddenly, his friend turned to him and shouted loudly that there was an enemy with a weapon behind him, and the hero needed to move away as quickly as possible. The guy heard these words but did not listen to the girl's advice. He simply continued to stand absolutely motionless in the same place. To the attacker's great surprise, Ye Tian remained completely unharmed, with only the metal pipe damaged by the blow. She bent over so badly, the bully couldn't believe his eyes. How was this possible? Had this schoolboy really surpassed human capabilities? In fact, the hero knew perfectly well that someone was walking behind him. And by the way, he hates attacks from behind the most. When the gang members saw the expression on the schoolboy's face, they were horrified. He clearly had some kind of inexplicable power at his disposal. They should get out of here as soon as possible. But to their great regret, Yi Tian had no intention of letting anyone go anywhere. He instantly moved to Wang and kicked him with all his strength. Now they will stay here because the full moon is an excellent time to deal with all their opponents once and for all. Chin Lan asked her friend if her ex-fiancé had any sadistic tendencies, because his behavior was very strange. Fang Miao believed that this man was quite capable of treating bad people as objects, and it would not be difficult for him to trample them. Despite all this, for some reason, Chin Lan considered the hero handsome. In this state, he managed to look very cool and powerful. By the way, right now the fight seems to be continuing again, because after one blow from the guy, it could have easily ended immediately. Tian advised the student not to get cocky because he still hadn't won and wouldn't be able to get away with it today. Yi Tian didn't even react to what he heard, but simply kicked Wang in the stomach again. He would never get tired of doing this. The leader advised him to cool down a bit, because a fight can be won not only by physical force, sometimes you need to use your head. Meanwhile, the man was lying helplessly on the ground and asking someone to help him. Why were they all just standing there and watching this abuse? Tian told the hero that although he was a skilled fighter, he was still a simple child, and children tend to be incredibly naive. At that moment, the guy put his spiritual energy into his legs and was about to hit the bully with all his might. But the bully, for some reason, stood still. As it turned out, he had an ace up his sleeve right now. One of his men had captured Zhang, so the hero should stop. If he lays even a finger on any of his subordinates, his dear comrade will have a very hard time. Yi Tian warned Tian that if even one hair fell from Zhang's head, he would have no reason to restrain himself. The bandits would definitely take pity on him. The leader really didn't expect to meet such a skilled fighter as this student, because there were only worthless weaklings everywhere. The guy was absolutely not interested in listening to this chatter. Now he was only interested in his friend's location. Tian advised his opponent not to worry, as he would see him very soon, while the girls, meanwhile, could not understand why the fight had stopped. Chen Lan still wants to help the hero, but her friend assures that someone like him definitely won't need the help of two girls. He's capable of standing up for himself. A few minutes later, another hooligan arrived at the scene. It seems he was the one who grabbed and took Zhang captive. This man behaved very arrogantly and wanted to show with his whole appearance that it was not difficult for him to grab that guy and beat him up. And this was apparently his dear comrade. Most likely today they need to eliminate him. He looks like an ordinary weakling. Ye Tian smiled when he saw this bastard and asked again if it was really this idiot who grabbed Zhang. The hooligan with the bat confirmed his words with an arrogant look. It seemed to him that this student was not some kind of serious threat.
Right now, the hero's comrade is lying all beaten and tied up in the middle of the trees on the back playground, not far from here.
This was enough for the guy. After hearing this, he only wanted to ask why this hooligan looked so happy. In response to this, the gang member laughed. Of course, he felt great satisfaction, because he had just been given the opportunity to humiliate someone who was weaker. This weakling cried and cried all the time, and also constantly called for help from his dear comrade. So why didn't Ye Tian come to his aid?
Zhang really amused that bastard with the bat. The poor brat was really waiting for a hero and counting on being saved.
The friends also heard all this vile speech. Chen Lan really wanted to personally approach this freak and teach him a proper lesson. Now, she had an incredibly strong desire to beat up that arrogant person, but Fang Miao restrained her and advised her not to interfere in the fight. The surprising thing was that Ye Tian was able to listen to this entire monologue calmly. He only asked if the bully had finished his story. But the gang member didn't quite understand the question, even if he told everything he wanted, what this worthless weakling was going to do to him. In fact, the hero was already ready to deal with the offender of his comrade. Right now he would know all his rage. The guy filled his right hand with energy and grabbed the bully by the face. At that moment, he really wanted to send the scoundrel to the next world. Ye Tian pressed the gang member's body into the ground with all his might. Let the fool consider this a temporary punishment, while he was still alive. As a result of this attack, the bully's body was completely pressed into the ground. Tian couldn't believe his eyes. This student was clearly not human. The next moment, the hero looked straight at him, and it immediately became clear that the gang leader would be next. Things were bad. The man found himself in an incredibly dangerous situation. If he didn't find a way to escape right now, he would be in very bad shape.
Ye Tian walked close to his enemy and looked closely into his eyes. Was this hooligan so scared that he lost the power of speech? Perhaps he needed some help.
Tian came to his senses a little and begged the guy not to approach him. It seemed to them that he was still capable of resisting, so he began to threaten. Of course, all this did not sound very convincing. The hero decides to ease his suffering a little. A funny idea came into his head. The next moment, the student snapped his fingers, and for some reason this caused all the clothes on the leader's body to be torn to shreds. Now the man stood completely naked. Even the hat on his head had disappeared somewhere. It turned out that he had no hair at all under it. At that moment, the bully looked incredibly ridiculous. He found himself in the most humiliating situation of his entire life. He was literally shaking with anger.
Yi Tian, in turn, laughed when he saw this. Now it became clear why he was so angry. Any person with such a hairstyle would hate everyone around him.
Tian couldn't really do anything. All he could do was curse the hero with every word he knew. Unfortunately, the guy couldn't help him with this problem in any way, because he was not a hairdresser, but he could still do something for him. In order to re-educate the student, he hit the bully with all his might in the most important place. He will remember this lesson for a long time. There is no doubt about it. Now that fool was dealt with, but the guy still needed to find his comrade as soon as possible. Zhang needed help now anyway. Suddenly, Ye Tian remembered that Wang was still nearby. This weakling stood in place and could not say a word. He was shaking all over with fear. The hero invites his ex-partner to experience everything they did to his friend, and asks if the bully would like to try his hand at stripping and tying up. The man was so upset that he simply started crying. He didn't even want to say anything anymore. He simply begged to let him go. But the guy stood there silently, and it was clear from his gaze that he didn't want to let anyone go anywhere. Van could only choose whether to undress himself or let things slide. In the end, the bully decides to do as he was ordered. First, he must take off his clothes and also promise to disappear forever after today's fight. However, Ye Tian was still not completely convinced of the sincerity of his former neighbor's words. Besides, why was he so embarrassed? They were practically family. At some point, the hero pretends that he is finally ready to let Van go. because it seems that the man has truly realized all his mistakes. The hooligan had already managed to rejoice, and hope had appeared in his soul that he would be able to leave here today alive and relatively healthy. In reality, things turned out to be a little more complicated. Van would only be able to escape if he managed to survive the fight with the entire basketball team. The athletes in school uniforms didn't quite understand what was being said, but Yi Tian quickly brought them to their senses. They heard everything correctly. If they didn't beat the man, they would deeply regret it. The gang members immediately began to carry out the order. The basketball players even showed enthusiasm, since no one wanted any trouble, and the hero, meanwhile, rushed to help his friend. Zhang was currently sitting tied up under a tree. His entire body was naked, and he looked like he had been badly beaten, and he was also being guarded by two hooligans. They didn't even notice how Yi Tian appeared behind them. He asked the villains if they had a hand in the fact that his comrade was now in this state. Only after this did the bandits turn around and realize that there was a man behind them. Now the fools didn't even suspect the danger they were in. Meanwhile, the hooligan, pressed into the ground, still could not get out of the trap. He did not understand why the others were busy with something else instead of helping him. But the basketball players had a very important task on which their lives depended. Right now, the whole crowd of them were beating up the unfortunate Van. However, their accomplice screamed so loudly that his cries became impossible to ignore, and Zhang's captor ordered them to pull him out of the ground. As it turned out, the naked hooligan was their captain. He was now too deep. It would be quite difficult to pull him out. The hero, in turn, was now confronting two villains. One of them was preparing to make his attack. The man was going to finish everything with one blow. But to his great surprise, when he punched the guy, nothing happened. Yi Tian simply looked into his eyes and asked how this weakling wanted to die. After this, the hooligan realized that he had made a very big mistake. He shouldn't have acted so frivolously. Maybe they would still feel sorry for them and let them go. In fact, Yi Tian had already decided what he wanted to do to him before he met them, so they couldn't hope for a pardon. The hero dealt with the villains in literally a minute. Now his comrade was finally freed. Now the friends were returning to the sports ground. At this time, the student was thinking how these worthless people dared to touch someone dear to him. They would definitely answer for this. Soon they were already there. Van was lying on the ground and writhing in pain, and the rest of the gang members were trying to somehow pull out their commander. The basketball players were scared when they saw Yi Tian. They couldn't even imagine that he would be able to return so quickly. The hooligan ordered his immediate release, as he was already tired of hanging around here for so long. The hero replied that he hadn't locked anyone in the cage, so he wasn't obligated to free some losers. This weakling was just lying on the ground, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to get out on his own. But in the end, Yi Tian agreed that the current generation was completely lacking in endurance and patience. But before that, he had to make sure that Zhang could stand on his own 2 feet. The comrade replied that he was completely fine. Now the student could not restrain himself and teach these scoundrels a lesson in any way he wanted. The hero even pretended to be ashamed of his actions and apologized to his friend's kidnapper. In this way, he wanted to lull the enemy's vigilance. The next moment, Yi Tian punched the ground with all his might, thus managing to free this loser in a matter of seconds. Then the guy continued to play the role and lied that he was very sorry and that, in fact, it was all just a misunderstanding between friends. The gang leader was a bit of a slowpoke, so he believed everything he heard without hesitation, and now he wants a smoke more than anything in the world. Yi Tian happily volunteered to help with this matter. He just happened to have a lighter in his hand. Would they let him show off one of his signature tricks? To be honest, it was very simple. All you had to do was keep your eyes on the lighter, and in just a few seconds, the miracle would happen. Immediately after this, Yi Tian used his unique power to control one of the elements, and suddenly a flame erupted in a very unexpected place. The hooligan was simply in shock. In surprise, the cigarette even fell out of his mouth. By some miracle, the fire spread to his private parts. The rest of the gang were already very scared. And now they were almost losing consciousness. Their opponent turned out to be a real monster. Right now, their commander was rolling on the ground in different directions, begging for help. His accomplices had come to their senses a little and hurried to him. The trick was truly a success. Zhang praised his comrade for such resourcefulness. He had to think of something like that. A few minutes later, the fire was extinguished. Now the commander of the Bantha was harboring a deep grudge. This was not the end. He would be able to return this humiliation tenfold. However, the guy didn't attach much importance to these words. Such worthless people as this hooligan could only talk nonsense. By the way, now he changed his mind about letting them go. Van had been lying on the ground for several hours already and just wanted to get away from here as quickly as possible, and this idiot again ran into trouble, who pulled his tongue. Suddenly, all the gang members felt a weight on themselves, creating the impression that the hero possessed an incredible aura that allowed him to enslave people's minds. The basketball players were unable to resist this, and one after another fell to their knees. At that moment, their bodies simply stopped obeying them. Apparently, thanks to Yi Tian's unique chaos energy, new opportunities were constantly opening up, and now no mortal could resist him. Today could have ended here. Anyway, the guy was no longer interested in such weaklings. It was becoming too boring. The next morning, the school principal learned of everything that had happened. Somehow, the fight on the playground was captured on video and appeared on the internet. As it turned out, this man was a former soldier. He had to work undercover for many years, but he had never seen such strength. Rumors about this event quickly spread throughout the school. Students talked about it all the time, and some girls decided that they should find new boyfriends. The hero, in turn, did not know that absolutely everyone around now knew about yesterday's fight, so he was surprised why there was so much noise in the auditorium. As soon as he entered the classroom, everyone immediately paid attention to him, and from their looks one could tell that they were a little afraid. And one girl passing by just stopped and opened her mouth. Her behavior greatly surprised Ye Tian, and in general, why did everyone suddenly fall silent? The guy didn't find an answer to his question and decided to simply ignore it. Who knows what's on the minds of mere mortals? It shouldn't interest him. So the student calmly went to his seat, but at the same time he could feel the close gaze of his classmates on him. Qinlan was also in the audience now. She was surprised by the behavior of her acquaintance. Now his changes were even more noticeable. By the way, now all the schoolgirls suddenly started to take a closer look at Ye Tian, because after what happened, it was clear to everyone around that he really wasn't some kind of weakling. The hero tried his best to act normal, but it was too much. Everyone around was looking exclusively at him. What was the reason anyway? He asked his classmates about this, but the girls only became very embarrassed in response. It was impossible to wait for an explanation from them. Qiao was also present in the class, and as soon as he noticed his sworn enemy, he immediately became incredibly furious. He still dreams of that day in the restaurant. Qinlan asked her friend if he had prepared for today's test because it was clear from his appearance that he was not at all afraid. Yi Tian smiled widely when he heard this question. She didn't need to worry about such trivial things. This test wouldn't cause him any problems. Meanwhile, a crowd of hooligans had gathered on the school grounds. They were behaving very brazenly, even allowing themselves to smoke cigarettes. One of them turned out to be Lao Zhou. It was he who gathered all the people here to properly teach the hero a lesson, but for some reason, several mercenaries still have not arrived. At some point, a school security guard notices this gang and asks them what these freaks are doing on the school grounds. They should get out of here as soon as possible. A man with a mohawk heard him. This bully looked very arrogant. With his whole appearance, he wanted to show how cool he was. The villain approached the worker closely and ordered him to repeat his words. How dare he interfere in the affairs of Sirius's gang? When the guard heard this, he was very scared, because this terrible and unbridled group is known to everyone around. They became popular because of their cruel behavior, but what such scoundrels as they needed in the school? The bully did not want to answer this question, and ordered the employee to get out. The man decided not to test his luck and immediately left. It was clear from his face that he was very scared. This greatly amused the villain. After this, the mohawked bandit asked the boss to speed up, because his wife had been waiting for him for a long time. Why couldn't they just go and do their job? The other hooligans also agreed with him. As soon as the others arrived, they should immediately deal with this upstart. Within a few minutes, the gang had stormed the school in full force, running into every classroom they came across and beating up whoever they could. None of the school children could resist. After all, these men were well trained. They would soon find their target. Soon, everyone in the neighboring classroom heard loud sounds coming from the corridor. One might have thought that an earthquake had started behind the wall. Suddenly, two tall men burst into the classroom and asked the frightened teacher what class Yi Tian was in. A few minutes later, the hooligans entered the classroom where the boy was sitting. He was ordered to immediately go out into the corridor. It seems these idiots still can't tell the difference between good and bad, but there's not enough room here. They all need to get out on the court. Lao Zhou agrees to this condition. After all, it is not in his principles to harm the innocent. The villains will be waiting for him on the street. The hero got up from the table and immediately followed them, but suddenly someone grabbed his hand. Apparently someone did not want to let him go. It turned out to be a friend. She really wanted to help somehow, but didn't know how, so she decided to just ask about it directly. But Ye Tian assured her that there was no need to worry about him. He would be back soon. He just needed to give a few re-education lessons. The man with the mohawk was surprised by the guy's fearlessness, and his boss told him not to relax. Even though there were many more of them, this enemy was strong. Suddenly, they noticed that someone is approaching them, but it was not a hero. As it turned out, the school principal personally decided to deal with them. One of the hooligans thought that one of the mercenaries they were waiting for had come to them, so he turned to him and asked why he was late. And Lao Zhou, in turn, joyfully greeted the man. Now they would definitely be able to easily deal with this annoying schoolboy. But to their great surprise, the director suddenly grabbed the gang leader by the head. For a long time, the hooligan could not understand what was happening. The former soldier managed to lift Lao Zhou half a meter off the ground with his bare hands. Is he the same brat who dared to break into their school? Only after this did the man say who he really was, at which point the veins on his face even appeared from anger. Now, the guy with blonde hair is in a very difficult situation. He needs help right now. He asks his accomplice for this. But the former soldier didn't even think about letting them go. He would never get away with it. No one could help him now, even if he screamed with all his might. Immediately after these words, the man let go of the bully's head for a moment and then hit him with all his strength with his knee right in the face. As a result of this attack, Lao Zhou lost consciousness and was definitely unable to continue the fight, while the director turned his attention to the second villain. The ex-soldier's whole demeanor made it clear that this scoundrel would be next, and besides, he had too little time for idiots like them, so everything would happen quickly. Meanwhile, a man arrived on the school grounds who was late for an assignment. He couldn't find his group, and they told him that everyone would be in front of the school. The guard was very scared when he realized that this was also one of the hooligans. He had had enough problems today, so he did not want to linger here for a minute. However, the man was very unlucky. A guy with blue hair noticed him and asked if he was a security officer, and if he had seen a group of people nearby. Right now, the director has already finished dealing with the two villains. The hero didn't even need to get his hands dirty today. When the man noticed the guy, he asked him if those two weaklings were waiting for him. Yi Tian, in turn, did not quite understand what was going on. The former soldier explained to him that there was nothing to worry about. Now the student could calmly return to his classroom and finish the test. He had taken care of everything. The hero looked down and asked his enemy if he had managed to screw up so badly that he had lost even before he arrived, which made Lao Zhou very angry and advised the guy not to relax. The director overheard their conversation and realized that in fact there were many more troublemakers. Apparently now he will have to work even harder. The student confirmed these guesses and sat right on the scoundrel. He advised the man to also wait a little. Soon all the hooligans should come here. The former soldier praised the guy for such courage. It was just like him. If they acted together, everything would be even easier. So the director pulled the second villain closer and sat on his back, just like the hero. Now they only had to wait a little. The late bully couldn't find his accomplices. The school was incredibly huge, and he had been wandering around its grounds for several dozen minutes. At some point, the bully started to get angry. Why these idiots just didn't wait for him? Now, because of this, he has to waste his time for nothing. At some point, he was noticed by a teacher into whose class two brats had entered earlier. The girl immediately realized that he was one of them and became worried. Besides, this man with blue hair wanted to ask her something, but the teacher didn't want to talk to him. She just wanted to run away as far as possible. The bully, in turn, did not understand at all what caused such a reaction. He tried to stop the girl, but he was not very successful. The teacher was so scared that she didn't even see the huge tree in front of her, so she hit her head on its trunk with all her might. The blue-haired man suggested that this reaction was most likely caused by his physical training, since he had recently bulked up a bit. These thoughts gave him a little boost of pride, but now was not the time for that. He needed to finish the task as quickly as possible and go to sleep. Ye Tian had been sitting on his opponent for quite a long time. At some point, he asked why their accomplice was so late, and Lao Zhou advised him to start worrying, because when the master finally appears, the hero will definitely pay very dearly for everything. After some time, their accomplice finally found the right place. When he saw that the rest of the bandits were lying on the ground, he asked who dared to touch his brothers. Yi Tian stood up from behind the bully and turned to his friend. He finally deigned to show up. Now he could have some fun. The blue-haired man laughed when he heard this, because he was confident in his abilities and was going to quickly sort this out and go about his business. However, the hero recommends that he come to his senses a little. Very soon he will understand that it was actually a huge mistake to come here at all. At some point, the villain realizes that this is the same guy who single-handedly dealt with the entire gang of basketball players. He also managed to watch the video on the internet. The bully's name was Master 2, and he was now incredibly scared. And the guy came close to him and asked why his skin had become so pale. The director, of course, understood that this student was a skilled fighter, but he certainly didn't expect that even the mercenaries would tremble with fear at the sight of him. The hero, meanwhile, could even afford to mock the bully. He stretched the skin on his face, making the master look very ridiculous. Lao Zhou was indignant at what he saw. Why was his accomplice acting like this? Was he really one of the best fighters in this city? Yi Tian decides to explain everything properly so that even an idiot like this scoundrel would understand everything. While the hero behaved very freely, one could feel the confidence in his speech. Immediately after this, the guy punched Lao Zhou in the stomach with all his might. He should remember well that no master they had so much hoped for would be able to help them. The man with the mohawk begged his accomplice to do something. But the villain just stood there, sweating profusely, and it was clear from his appearance that he was scared to death. But why does the master allow this self-confident schoolboy to insult their gang? How can one continue to call oneself a man after that? Meanwhile, Tin stood on the roof of the school and looked through binoculars. He couldn't understand why this mercenary was standing in place, what was going on there. At some point, the master comes to his senses. Apparently, he finally pulled himself together and decided to defend the honor of their group. After all, he is one of the main members of Sirius's gang, and as long as he has the strength to stand on his feet, no one is allowed to insult their honor. Ye Tian understood the path his enemy had chosen, which was quite commendable, since usually all his opponents would simply shake with fear and run away as far as possible. The blue-haired man confidently walked towards the hero, and Tin decided that this man would finally complete the task assigned to him. In just a few seconds, the master was standing right next to the guy, but what was on his mind now? What technique was he going to use? What the bully did shocked his accomplices. What the hell just happened? Why was this idiot behaving like this? The master suddenly fell to his knees and apologized to Ye Tian. In fact, he was just passing by looking for a toilet, and he had never seen these villains before. The hero noticed that Lao Zhou and his accomplice called the man a master. Were they really trying to fool him so stupidly now? What about Sirius's gang? In response to this, the bully began to deny everything. He was not a master, and in general did not consider himself worthy of talking to such a great man. The gang leader couldn't believe his eyes. How could he fall flat on his face like that? Their boss would never let this worthless guy live in peace. But the blue-haired man didn't care, because the risk of dying at the hands of a hero was much higher than at the hands of some rich schoolboy. Tin was still standing nearby and watching what was happening. He couldn't believe that such an experienced fighter could behave like this. One of his assistants tried to calm the gentleman down, as his doctor had recommended that he be less angry, as such behavior was bad for his health. But Tin simply ordered him to get out of his sight. His ward should call his uncle right now and report that their plan had failed miserably. At some point, Yi Tian got tired of this humiliation, and he allowed the master to stand up. In fact, it was already disgusting to watch. After this, the hero simply goes about his business, only asking to convey to the boss Lao Zhou that this is not the end. They will all pay their bills. Meanwhile, in an expensive mansion, a certain Mrs. Hong was given the information that the woman had asked about several days earlier. She thanked her assistant and let her leave work early. She simply wanted to study all the information on her own. Finally, the secretary said that Su Mushan had called their office a few minutes ago. Hong was surprised that this girl suddenly remembered her. As it turned out, the data concerned Ye Tian. It contained a brief description of his character traits, as well as his medical history and much more. When the woman read all this, she was very surprised. Wasn't this guy just an ordinary weakling? Apparently Su Mushan managed to find a real treasure. At some point, the lady felt the presence of a man next to her, so she ordered the stranger to immediately come out of his disguise. It turned out to be an unknown man in a black robe. He praised Hong because since their last meeting her skills had improved greatly. She even managed to find him. The woman even knelt before the mysterious man. Apparently she had met him before. So what made him come here in person? As it turned out, the man wanted Hong to go to the hero and sort out the situation, since all the groups in that area had been suppressed, and he needed to find out the details. The lady immediately agreed to this task. She really wanted to know more about Yi Tian. After all, his behavior had changed greatly in a very short time. Now 2 students were sitting in the classroom diligently preparing for exams. One of them was upset because most likely today they had missed another fight. Fang Miao asked her friend if she was really that interested in the hero, since he was usually the one who took part in the fights. Suddenly Qinglan grabbed her classmate's hand and asked her for a favor. Would she allow her to date Ye Tian? The dark-haired girl didn't even understand why she was being asked for permission, but her friend should get to know this person better before starting a relationship. In response, the girl with blonde hair assured that she had already made up her mind a long time ago, that she really liked this guy and was ready to start dating him right now. Suddenly, Fan Mao felt that same feeling of incredible emptiness inside her, and it made her feel very sad. She decides that she has had enough of the lesson for today and wants to go to the restroom. Her friend is going to go with her. They always act like sisters. Right now, in one of the corridors, there was a student named Timon. He was very popular because of his karate gang. All the schoolgirls thought he was handsome and a cutie. It seemed to them that he had just stepped out of the screens of their favorite TV series. He was a fairly tall guy with blonde hair, and he was always accompanied by security in the form of 2 fighters, although many girls ran after him. This student was always interested in only one. He had loved Chinlan since elementary school. By a coincidence, he was lucky enough to meet his beloved near the restroom. But will the beauty reciprocate his feelings? The guy approached her very brazenly and offered to go out together somewhere to have fun today, but the girl asked her to leave him alone. Timon was already used to hearing refusals from his beloved, but this time he was tired of it and was determined to get what he wanted. At one point, this bastard literally orders Chinlan to go to a restaurant with him right now, because he can give her everything she needs. Fang Miao rushed to help her friend. This idiot can't come even a centimeter closer to her. He's taking on too much. The student asked his beloved why the schoolgirl always went with her. It seemed he didn't like it for some reason. The dark-haired girl asks her friend to run to the restroom, and she will stay here and detain this pervert because she can do it. But Timon wasn't going to let anyone go. Was the beauty still able to restrain herself at the sight of him? That fool was acting truly disgusting. Fang Miao orders them to immediately leave them alone and never come closer than 100 meters again. The guy, in turn, advises this girl to think carefully about her words because she shouldn't forget about his strength. Does she really think she can install him? The beauty was worried at that moment because the student was really different from the others. His strength was very impressive, and what if he really decided to attack? When Qinglan heard the threats, she immediately intervened. If even one hair fell from her friend's head, Ye Tian would never let this scoundrel go alive. Timing couldn't understand why his chosen one suddenly started talking about this guy, because everyone at school knew that he was Fang Miao's fiancé. In response to this, the beauty stated that, by the way, the hero is now her boyfriend. They even kissed once in a restaurant. Everyone around could confirm this. When the student heard this, he became incredibly angry. Even his eyes changed color to red. Could this really be true? One of his guards confirmed the girl's words, although he did not know all the details, but a kiss between the two definitely took place. When Timon heard this, he became even more angry. How dare this damn weakling seduce his chosen one? Wasn't one bride enough for him? Immediately after this, he orders one of his subordinates to immediately find Ye Tian, but the guard tries to dissuade the boss from this idea. However, the student remained adamant. Even though he knew about the hero's unique abilities, his pride did not allow him to simply abandon his beloved girl. During the long break, one of Ye Tian's classmates asked him if he had managed to complete his test, since he had little time, and it turned out that the guy was confident that he had passed with the highest score. Suddenly, his friend called the hero over, because everyone on the main school forum was currently discussing his relationships with girls. Ye Tian came closer and confirmed this. Everyone on the site was indeed arguing about who his real bride was. Zhang even began to envy his friend a little when he only managed to seduce the second beauty. He probably has real talent, but the hero only now found out that he actually has 2 girls. These stupid mortals love to make up all sorts of nonsense. Right now, Timon and his guards were heading out to find the guy. He wanted to immediately put him in his place and win the heart of his chosen one. He simply has to end all of this today. Hasn't this idiot been taught to share? How one beauty might not be enough? The guy abruptly opened the doors to the auditorium and loudly challenged Ye Tian to a duel. Apparently rage had completely clouded his mind. The hero became interested in this eccentric and immediately approached him, wondering if he really wanted to measure his strength. As soon as Timon saw his target, he immediately rushed towards the guy. This insatiable bastard would get a good beating from him today. His security guard asked him to think again before acting. After all, this student is just a monster who beats people like punching bags. But Timon could no longer retreat, because he had been pursuing his beloved for several years. She was his dream. These fools don't even know what it's like to feel that your love is not reciprocated. At that moment, memories appeared in the guy's head. About a month ago, he once again asked Chinlan to date, but she again refused. Perhaps it seemed to her that everything was happening too quickly, but most likely the reason was different. For some reason, this fool chose the most inopportune moment for his proposal. After all, right now, the girl was busy with something a little different. Giving a bouquet of flowers near the toilet is probably the stupidest idea one can imagine. But Timon still took it very seriously. Today he was wounded right in the soul. Apparently, love requires colossal endurance from you. A few minutes later, the student came out of the restroom, hoping that this weirdo had finally left her alone. At least he wasn't there. But to her great regret, This pervert was waiting for her near the door this whole time, with a huge diamond ring in his hands. But Chinlan was not interested in this at all. She hit him in the face with her palm, with all her strength. Because of this, the guy even had a huge mark on his entire cheek. Did he really still have hope, even after the beauty had spent so much time sitting in the restroom waiting for him to leave? Timon even took a 3-day online course in training to learn how to seduce a beauty queen, so why can't he do it? After this, the student for some reason turned on his laptop and tried to prove that this was all the truth. Yi Tian actually didn't even know that such lessons existed. The hero was very amused by this. This guy was really very funny. Did he really have enough sense to sign up for such courses? Timon, in turn, did not understand what was wrong with this. He was more interested in the question of why nothing was working out for him with girls. Any normal person could answer this question. Most likely the problem is that he is behaving like some kind of abnormal stalker. Suddenly, Chinlan ran into their class. She asked her friend if everything was okay with him, if this fool had caused him any problems. In fact, the guy turned out to be quite harmless. Apparently, he just really wants to find a person who will truly love him. Yi Tian decided to show by his own example how to behave with the one you truly love with all your heart. The hero smoothly approached the beauty and brought his hand to her face. Was he really going to kiss her right on the lips now? The girl was very embarrassed because of this. What was on his mind? There were a bunch of their classmates around. It was all too revealing. But the guy advises his girlfriend to simply not pay attention to it. Now, they only have mutual love. At some point, Chinlan can't take it anymore and runs out of the classroom. Most likely, the hero wanted to demonstrate his ability to embarrass the opposite sex. Zheng was surprised by his comrade's abilities. This could truly be called visual learning. The whole secret was that you should never copy the behavior of others. If you behave naturally, you will never be rejected. Suddenly, a schoolboy ran up to them and said that a certain young gentleman had urgent business with Yi Tian, and he was ready to take everyone to the right place. It turned out to be a large exhibition of gambling stones, and it turned out that Zhang was very interested in this kind of thing. You couldn't tell from his appearance that he liked it. The hero was also a little surprised. Could his friend really be attracted to gambling? You couldn't tell from that situation with the buns in the restaurant. At some point, the guy stopped abruptly and picked up a small blue book. The seller remarked that it seemed like the dear guest was a real connoisseur. It turned out to be the original of a very good textbook. But Yi Tian didn't believe the merchant. How such a rare thing could end up in such a place. But the man insisted on the truth of his words. Besides, this book is not expensive at all. It can become the property of the guy for only 12,000. Zhang was very angry when he listened to me. Does this bald fool really expect to deceive them? Such a fake costs me more than 20. The merchant was a little scared. In fact, he had not lied about the authenticity of his goods, but he was ready to give up almost the full price. This book emanated an unusual aura. If the hero were to buy it now, he might very well receive a unique item at his disposal. However, as soon as the friends moved away from the display case, the energy emanating from the paper suddenly disappeared somewhere. Could it really have been that little? Suddenly the boy thought about how much aura was contained in the jade that was extracted from the gardens in his home world. He had never been able to see it in his life. At some point, an elderly man with his granddaughter approached them and turned to the young man with a book in his hands. The hero had no idea who these people were and saw them for the first time. He became interested in how he could help the old man. Suddenly, a friend appeared from behind him and greeted Grandpa Shui. Zhang was probably familiar with this elderly man. As it turned out, the old man was interested in the book in Yi Tian's hands. He was just walking nearby and noticed this antique, wondering if the student would like to give it to him. The guy wasn't against such a deal, but he didn't want to give away his property for free. He had an offer according to which the master could buy what he wanted. His friend didn't fully understand why the hero was doing this, since they had just bought this defective trinket for only 20. So why all this manipulation? However, Yi Tian didn't stop there, but continued to drive up the price of this antique, because as it turned out, he wasn't going to sell it right now. Everyone around him began to explain that, by the way, this grandfather was a very authoritative person, and it was better not to provoke him. Why not just give him this book? But is the guy really obliged to do this? Does he really have to give away his property to every passerby? This is also simply ridiculous. Suddenly, a girl with green hair ran towards him. It seemed she was very angry at the hero for what he was doing. Why is this worthless person behaving like this? After all, her grandfather was the most famous doctor in the city who saved hundreds of lives. No one dares to contradict him. When Yi Tian heard this, he was very interested in one thing. How could the best doctor in the area not see his own illnesses? The old man immediately asked his granddaughter to stop. Such behavior was very uncultured. He simply could not find this book for a long time. He is ready to buy it for 5 million. Even the hero was shocked when he heard such a sum. Is this book really that valuable? But what is so special about it? While Zhang was happy for his friend, the guy simply threw the thing right in the girl's direction. Since it was so important to the old man, let them take it. As payment, they simply have to stop bothering him. This situation is a bit annoying. Mere mortals are sometimes very arrogant. Now, Ye Tian wants to go to the place where the masters demonstrate stone carving. His friend promised to tell him more about it. Zhang couldn't believe that his brother would just give up a huge amount of money, but for the hero, it didn't matter. In fact, he was capable of getting whatever he wanted. The elderly man's granddaughter's name was Jianhu, and apparently the guy's behavior made her very angry. Next time, she would definitely punish him. When Ye Tian looked at the various stones from all over the world, he noticed that there were definitely jades similar to those in his world, but they were quite difficult to find. His friend couldn't forget that situation with the book. Maybe they should still return to the old doctor, but the hero asks to forget about it. Right now, he has more important things to do. He picked up a stone and easily broke it in half. This specimen is definitely not suitable. Zhang explained that the minerals Yi Tian was interested in were actually incredibly rare, and the chances of them being able to find them here were very slim. Suddenly, a girl approached them from behind. It turned out to be the sister of one of the guys. She looked quite pretty. Zhang introduced his best friend to his relative, but she responded by ordering the hero to stay away from her brother. The two did not get along from the start. Yi Tian's friend began to make excuses for his sister, but there was no need for that, because the hero would never offend someone like this girl. The sister, in turn, was very skeptical about Yi Tian. He seemed very strange and suspicious to her. Her relative was always friends with some scoundrels. After some time, it became clear that there really were incredibly small reserves of spiritual energy left in this world. The guys still hadn't managed to find anything worthwhile. Suddenly, the girl approached them again and said that the hero was very lucky. He found a good stone, because the chance that it contains jade is high. Could this beauty really understand stones too? Zhang advised his friend to listen to her, since his sister had been practicing in this field for a long time. Yi Tian invites her to play a game. He will bet that there is nothing in this mineral. If he wins, he will get a kiss. If he loses, he will never get close to her brother again. The girl was surprised at how self-confident this brat was. She happily agreed to such a bet. Now she had a huge chance of winning. But in reality, the little sister didn't have a chance, because the hero had already absorbed the essence from this stone, and now there wasn't a drop of energy left in him. Yi Tian asked the seller to split this thing. As it turned out, this mineral was delivered very recently from a unique place. It definitely has an aura. The girl noticed that her opponent was behaving like a child who wanted the impossible. So where did he get such confidence from? At some point, these two came very close to each other. Most likely, the hero simply doesn't know how to lose and always gets what he wants. The beauty warns that if his hands come even a centimeter closer to her, he will greatly regret it. However, this did not stop the guy. He only wanted to see this girl angry even more. Was she really capable of showing something interesting? After this, the sister couldn't stand it any longer and broke free from Yi Tian's arms. Now it had finally become clear to her that her brother was hanging out with an absolutely irresponsible idiot. The hero was even very offended by such words. No one had ever allowed themselves to address him like that before, and today they even called him such a bad word. In fact, the guy even liked it. He loves it when a girl has character and is able to stand up for herself. In the end, it all turned out to be just a joke. Ye Tian wanted to see the beauty's reaction. Now it was clear what kind of person she was. Meanwhile, the seller had already finished his work. Right now the man was carrying a magic stone split in half in his hands. The sister couldn't believe her eyes. There wasn't even a drop of spiritual energy in this mineral. The likelihood of that was extremely low. The hero hopes that the beauty will admit her defeat because they did make a fair deal. But will she want to fulfill such conditions? The girl was ready to accept defeat, although she still couldn't understand the reasons why this happened. And she wasn't against a kiss. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a stool that appeared out of nowhere. It flew straight towards them. The one who threw it clearly did not want their lips to touch. Fortunately, Ye Tian managed to grab his girlfriend's hand. Only thanks to this they remained unharmed. Hadn't this scoundrel been taught that it was rude to attack from behind? The attacker turned out to be some student. He was going to take over their family with the help of his sister. Sooner or later, she would definitely become his wife. Could this fool really have come up with such a ridiculous plan in his head? It sounds really threatening, But why did he decide that this girl belongs to him? The bully thought that this was very reckless because no one dared to talk to him in such a tone, and by the way, he practices martial arts. Some passersby began to whisper among themselves. This guy's name was Fang. Everyone around considered him a real martial artist, a real professional gentleman. The beauty assured her friend that all this was complete nonsense, because they had not even signed a marriage contract, but their gang and her family were connected. She also recommended that the hero simply ask for forgiveness, but the student refused this offer. In fact, such a word is not in his vocabulary. The girl didn't understand how one could be so crazy. After all, one must know how to retreat in time when the advantage is not on one's side. But Ye Tian could no longer be persuaded. If the young master was so eager to fight, he would be able to demonstrate everything he was capable of. Feng decided that his enemy was apparently in a great hurry to the other world. This was very short-sighted on his part. Zhang advised his friend to be careful because this man was a real fighter. The fight started with a sweeping kick. The hero was able to easily dodge it. If this self-confident idiot wants a fight, then so be it. Yi Tian immediately hit his opponent in the chest with his elbow with all his might. The attack was incredibly powerful. Most likely the overconfident master would not be able to continue. As expected, this vaunted young professional was a brazen, spoiled brat who couldn't lose. In fact, Feng was still standing on his feet and was even about to continue the fight, choosing the previously thrown stool as his weapon. The young master called himself a genius. He was lucky to be born that way because he had incredible learning abilities. He was able to learn any technique. To do this, he only needed to see a certain technique once, after which it would not be difficult to perfectly repeat it on his own. Well, for some reason he didn't copy Ye Tian's technique, but simply rushed at him with a stool in his hands, to his great regret. Such nonsense won't work. At the same time, Fang could not understand where he had gone wrong, because he had managed to predict all of his enemies' movements, but the hero asked him not to bother himself with these stories. The young master couldn't believe his eyes because all his life he believed that it doesn't matter how strong you are, what matters is how you learn. The guy perceived all this as children's fairy tales. This world is full of distant fighters, but only a few have enough discipline to become truly great. Fang continued to stand his ground. He considered himself a real talent, therefore he was destined to win every confrontation. After all, this weakling was much better at talking than fighting. All his movements were incredibly slow and predictable. Therefore, it was not difficult for the hero to easily dodge his attack and immediately after that hit him with his fist in response with all his might. It was hard to believe, but even after that the young master continued to believe in his victory. He tried to understand why he couldn't hit the target even once.
Was this really all that our young genius was capable of? He still needs to work a lot on his fighting abilities. This is no good.
Feng couldn't accept his defeat, but the best solution for him was to simply give up, because someone like him would never reach Ye Tian. At one point, the young master became so angry that he lost his composure. It was a personal moment to finish him off once and for all. This arrogant person should remember that his strength and status do not give him the right to control other people's lives, and besides, he cannot even win. The hero grabbed his opponent by the head and threw him onto the concrete floor. From the moment of his resurrection, he decided that he would never again feel sorry for bad people. Fang finally realized that there was no way he could surpass his opponent in martial arts. But was that really the only way to resolve any dispute? A young talent invites a guy to a stone-throwing competition. The one who manages to find the stone with the most spiritual energy wins. The young master tried to provoke the hero and said that he would agree to such a confrontation only if there was money at stake. But a beggar like Ye Tian was unlikely to be able to do that. After all, someone like him definitely has empty pockets, and Feng, by the way, in addition to incredible talent, also has a ton of money and an excellent reputation. Zhang wanted to help his friend and was ready to give him all the money he had won after that bet with the buns in the restaurant. But the talented master ordered him not to interfere, otherwise his whole family would have a hard time. He doesn't want that, right? Fang tried his best to look intimidating and warned one last time that anyone who dared to support his rival would meet their death that very moment. Several of his assistants realized that their leader seemed to have gone a little crazy, and the best solution would be to bring him to his senses a little. Yi Tian couldn't get over one thing. Why did all the rich kids always like to look for trouble for themselves? After all, you have to be a truly narrow-minded person to behave so arrogantly, without even studying your enemy. At that moment, the girl asked her brother who his friend really was. But to be honest, it didn't really matter, because Jean truly believed in him. And even if the hero has no money or fame, this guy will still do his best to support him, so he doesn't feel sorry for any amount of money. But Ye Tian said that there was no need for that, since he would be able to surpass this upstart in this rivalry anyway. From now on, this battle was their personal matter, and no one but the two of them should interfere in this dispute. As it turned out, the hero had the right technique this time too. Thanks to his unique abilities, he was able to infuse a large amount of aura into even the most ordinary stone. Fang calmed down a little and was ready to start the competition. Now they would both choose one stone, the loser would lose all his money. Zhang asks his comrade to think again before starting. After all, this young master is quite good at such things. However, Ye Tian had already decided everything and even chosen his stone. In fact, he simply transferred the energy from his body directly into the mineral. The stone looked rather unsightly, and everyone thought that this guy was completely clueless about this kind of thing and would definitely lose. Feng also chose his stone. He found it funny to see his opponent's choice. Since these two minerals didn't even need to be split, everything was already obvious. But the guy advises the young talent not to be so confident, because only he who laughs last laughs best. The worker split the first stone. The energy it contained was estimated at 200 to 300 units. In fact, the result was not bad. It was the Feng mineral. The arrogant student was already celebrating his victory. He also boasted that his family received 50% of all the jade mines in the country. The hero, in turn, behaved absolutely calmly. His opponent didn't need to rejoice prematurely. Surely his parents hadn't told him that. The worker couldn't believe her eyes. How was this even possible? This stone looked like ordinary waste, but at the same time it contained excellent jade. Those present were also surprised by what had happened. Could it really be that the young master had managed to lose even in this argument? Fang was very angry because the results were announced so slowly. How much longer should he wait for his applause? He had a lot of other things to do. But when he saw what essence was inside the Yi Tian mineral, he froze in amazement for a few seconds. And after that, he immediately attacked the innocent worker. It seemed to him that she had set it all up, because it was simply impossible to believe in such a coincidence. However, it didn't really matter. Now the young master could see the imperial-grade jade with his own eyes. He couldn't win this competition. After all, even if Feng were to break in half absolutely all the stones that are here, he would never be able to find material that is even close to this level. People standing around were shocked by the quality of this mineral. Seeing such a thing in real life was a real stroke of luck. The sister asked her brother to pinch her to make sure that what was happening was real, that they really had the chance to see the imperial jade. However, the young master was not going to give up. He ordered that all the stones available here be brought to him. It was very difficult for him to admit his defeat. One of the workers asked the young master to calm down, since it would be impossible to find material of such a level in any case. But Fang did not want to listen to this. After some time, a huge pile of stones lay on the table, but as expected, there was nothing like that inside them. Feng should just accept her defeat. Is there still any hope for victory? His actions are simply worthless. Yi Tian decides to give the precious jade to his friend, because today he is in a good mood, and he wants to share it with others. The girl was incredibly happy with such a gift because such a thing is very difficult to find. Today is just a great day for her. Even the young gentleman was surprised by such generosity, how this eccentric could simply give her his mineral, for which one could get a whole fortune. In fact, this didn't really matter to the hero, because he promised his girlfriend that he would definitely defeat this scoundrel in an argument under any conditions. Eventually, the workers cut through all the stones and found a great deal of high-quality jade, but none of it was imperial. Feng finally realized the situation he was in, but instead of accepting his defeat, he ordered everyone to stand still. Now everyone who witnessed this confrontation must keep their mouths shut for the rest of their lives. Apparently this rich kid decided that he can get away with anything. People were perplexed. Does he really think that only because of his authoritative family he can act like this, since they haven't even done anything bad? However, Fang didn't want to listen to these stupid people. He ordered everyone to shut up and just follow all his orders. And he had something special prepared for Ye Tian. The best fighter in the city would arrive here right now, and he would be able to put the upstart in his place. The hero was not at all frightened by such threats, but calmly took a chair and sat down. He was already impatient to look at the next fighter, whom he could easily defeat. At the same time, everyone around thought this guy was crazy, because Master 2 was considered the best fighter in the serious gang. Such behavior was suicide. The beauty advised Ye Tian to simply give the imperial jade to this foolish child, because life was much more important than such trifles. However, the hero has already decided everything. His friends just need to relax and completely hand over the current situation to him. Zhang noticed that his comrade was acting exactly the same as the time he was stopped from eating 100 buns. Was he really going to defeat Master 2? Fang believed that such behavior was just a show. His opponent needed to stop pretending to be a knight. He was probably scared to death. In response to this, the hero simply smiled. Since childhood, he has been inclined to adhere to his moral principles, one of which is to always fight back. Soon, the gang's best fighter arrived at the scene, accompanied by numerous accomplices. Yi Tian immediately warned them that they could only save their lives if they did not attack first. The man didn't immediately understand who his target was, so he ordered the student to get up from his chair right now. They would punish him properly now. It was hard to believe, but this master turned out to be the same fighter whom the hero had humiliated on school grounds a few days ago. The man stood behind him and couldn't believe his eyes. Please let it be some other student. Is this really possible? But to his great regret, it turned out to be Ye Tian. The bandit couldn't believe his eyes. He was probably the unluckiest person on the entire planet, because such coincidences rarely happen even in fairy tales. At that moment, a bunch of thoughts were mixed up in his head. Why was he having to deal with all this? If he managed to leave this place today, he would definitely run away and retire. And Feng, with a joyful face, turned to the master and asked him to eliminate this upstart as quickly as possible. It wouldn't be difficult for him to pull this off. However, the man already knew how this would all end, so he decided not to waste time. His weapon immediately fell to the floor, and he himself approached the hero and abruptly fell to his knees. Now the villain once again needs to come up with some incredibly stupid story to justify himself. But this time the guy wasn't going to act so magnanimously, because this man was once again behaving incredibly arrogantly. The girl was very surprised by what she saw. What kind of person this Ye Tian was, that even the best fighter from the serious gang fell to his knees before him. Only now did she understand why her brother behaved this way around the hero. After all, there really were good reasons for it. The young gentleman could not understand what the best fighter he knew was doing now, since he was ordered to immediately deal with this beggar. However, the master advised Feng to remain silent. If he angered this guy too much now, no one would leave here safe and sound. After this, the young talent apparently went completely crazy, because he decided to deal with the hero himself, and now he called the rest of the gang members to do this. Yi Tian turned to the man and asked him to explain what this student meant now, whether he was really threatening to kill him. The master had no other choice but to order his subordinates to seize the young master and shut his mouth. If he insulted the hero again, there would be no turning back. The bandits immediately began to carry out the order, because they had already heard many stories about this guy, and no one wanted to risk their lives. Yi Tian reminded the master that he always returned everything to people tenfold, which meant that they would not leave here just like that. After all, Feng was just ready to take another person's life, which means he needs to be taught a lesson. But the guy is much kinder than him. Therefore, there is no need to kill anyone. The man is obliged to break the young master's arm right now, and in case of refusal, he himself understands the consequences perfectly well. The hero looked at the bandit and asked if he needed to repeat his order again. At that moment, the man didn't know what to do, but in the end, there was nowhere to go. If he refused now, the situation would only get worse. Fang couldn't believe what was happening now. What this man was going to do. Was he really not afraid of his connections at all? The master made it clear to the young master that not everything in this world could be bought, and not everything could be decided by ordinary influence. After all, sometimes you can meet people with whom you should never get involved, otherwise there is a high risk of losing your own life. But just as the bandit was already fully concentrated on his task, the hero suddenly told him to stop. As it turned out, he was just joking. In fact, there was no need to punish an ordinary fool so cruelly. Today the guy is incredibly kind. At this moment, his enemies could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They were incredibly lucky. They could go home alive. However, the rich bastard still needs to be punished somehow. Otherwise, he will continue to behave badly towards other people. Yi Tian decided to be rather creative. As punishment, he boiled a kettle and poured hot water directly into Feng's pants. At that moment, the guy felt the most severe pain in his life, because of which he had to beg one of the bandits to at least somehow help. However, to his great regret, the man could do nothing, because there was no doctor nearby. Apparently, he just had to endure it. The hero was pleased with this picture, but now it was the last warning. If these worthless people bothered him again, they would definitely lose their lives. After that, they all leave together. The girl thought that they should be punished a little more severely, but decided to simply remain silent. The guy suspected that his friends were thinking about this now, but now these hooligans would never stand in their way. Then the events take us a few days forward. Now the friends were talking about how nothing interesting has been happening at school lately. Fan Miao advised her friend not to dwell on such nonsense and to devote more time to studying, but the girl replied that such a beauty as she did not need to study at all. After all, there was always the possibility of seducing some smart classmate. No student could resist her face. At one point, the dark-haired girl slapped her friend hard on the back of the head with her palm. She needed to stop acting like a fool. After this, they apologized to the guy and quickly leave, while the girl with blonde hair was very happy because she could have seduced her classmate with just one look. Yi Tian just arrived at school. Today was a great sunny day. This can be used for productive cultivation. Suddenly, a red car drove up to him. It turned out to be Ms. Hong. It was time to meet this guy and see what he's really like. The hero tried to ignore the expensive car because right now he was in a state of cultivation, and if he interrupted it, it would be bad. However, events did not turn out quite as he wanted because the driver of the car stopped right next to him and addressed him. Had Ye Tian really become so popular that even beauties and expensive cars were chasing him? It all sounded too optimistic. The pretty woman was visible from the school grounds, so a few guys thought they might have a chance, but it would be pretty hard to damage something like that. The lady stood near her car and waited for the hero to approach her. One of the school children even decided to take a photo of her. But as soon as Ye Tian took a few steps, the woman swung her leg and tried to kick him with all her strength, even though she had a red rose tattoo on her leg. It turned out that Hong had simply inhuman strength. With one swing of her leg, the floor beneath her shattered into small pieces, and a huge hole formed at the place of impact. All this only indicated that this woman was the owner of one of the 12 flowers. But why did she need to attack unexpectedly? The lady, in turn, was surprised that the guy managed to so easily evade her unexpected attack. This student has sharp instincts. After that, Hong struck again, but this time with her left hand, and Ye Tian was also able to easily dodge this attack. He suddenly wondered if teasing this woman a little would speed up his cultivation process. The lady, in turn, became more and more interested in this guy with each passing minute. He would definitely be able to show her many more good techniques. After this, their fight continued for some time. It seemed that the hero was finally lucky enough to meet an opponent who could fight him on equal terms. Hong couldn't believe what was happening right now because Ye Tian was able to easily take 8 of her strongest attacks without a single scratch. She couldn't help but ask the hero who he was and where he came from in this world. But Ye Tian just continued to play with his rival. Because of this, the lady became very furious. Now she used her spiritual energy to levitate in the air and lift huge stones along with her. Well, why complicate everything so much? As it turned out, the woman also possessed incredible speed. She was able to disappear from the place where she was in the blink of an eye. Moreover, she managed to appear in the same way right in front of her opponent. Only a truly brilliant fighter could react to such attacks. Qinlan and her friend were nearby, and the incredible fight caused a huge wind to rise. It was like a real hurricane. Fang Miao felt as if she was in some kind of movie because what was happening could not be explained by simple laws of the universe. At some point, Yi Tian gets tired of this performance, so he takes advantage of the moment and grabs his rival by the leg. In fact, such attacks are absolutely useless against him. If a woman continues in the same spirit, it will end badly for her. Hong couldn't believe what was happening. This student had just managed to block one of her most powerful attacks, something that an ordinary person couldn't do. However, the hero could not understand what surprised the lady so much. With his strength, it would not be difficult for him to finish this duel in a few seconds. Meanwhile, the friends ran closer and asked the woman to stop, because their friend could die from such blows. However, the lady was not going to listen to them. She was too interested in fighting the hero, because his strength turned out to be simply incredible. After another lunge, Ye Tian grabbed his opponent's hand, and he managed to move even faster. After that, the guy used a small portion of his chaos spiritual energy and threw Hong aside. Right now, she was flying into a concrete wall. The woman flew at such a speed that a huge imprint was left behind from her body. Could it be that Ye Tian's strength had unlimited potential? Fan Miao was familiar with the lady, and the girl did not want her to get hurt at all, so she hurried to help her. Now Hong was finally convinced that her strength was insufficient to confront such an opponent. This did not fit into her head. After all, the hero could have easily broken her arm just now, but he didn't do it. Could it be that he was just playing with her all this time? A girl with dark hair immediately ran up to her and asked if she was okay, and if it wasn't too dangerous to use such strong blows against schoolchildren. But the lady replied that this guy was far from an ordinary person, and it was impossible to harm him in any way with such blows. Did this silly girl still think that her friend was an ordinary high school student? She should gain some life experience as soon as possible. In fact, Ye Tian was deceiving everyone around him. He definitely has some special cultivation method that gives him unique abilities. Qinlan soon came running to them too. She was very impressed by the fight. The two looked incredibly powerful. The hero asked the lady if she was already exhausted. Perhaps they should take a break so that the woman could work on her physical abilities. Because of this, Hong became very angry and lost her temper. No one dares to blame her for lack of endurance. She didn't have a chance to win. The guy once again grabbed her leg right in the middle of a lunge. Resistance was simply useless. Only thanks to her unique skill and vast experience did the woman manage to escape the hold, and now she has done the splits.
Yi Tian really liked these movements. Such skill was extremely rare. The lady was truly a very skilled fighter.
Eventually, the hero gets tired of this fight and hurries to school, but at the end he says goodbye to Hong and calls her by the unfamiliar name of Rowley. It was the first time the lady had heard anyone call her that, but for some reason the name seemed incredibly familiar to her. At some point, the lady felt very dizzy, and it felt as if she had forgotten something very important. Fang Miao asked the woman who Rowley was, but Hong was still confused and had no idea what it meant.
Now the guy has met the second owner of the flower artifact. This is definitely not a simple coincidence. But what should he do next?
Meanwhile, the girls went to the nearest restaurant. The lady needed to take a little rest and regain her strength. The woman turned to the dark-haired girl and suggested that Ye Tian, and she actually came from the same world. And even their fake engagement was not a simple coincidence. Most likely these events were predetermined by fate itself. And didn't it seem strange to Fang Miao that her friend never denied their mutual connection and played along every time? As it turns out, Hong and the dark-haired girl are sisters who would have thought that a weakling like Ye Tian could win her heart. However, Fang Miao immediately began to deny everything. In fact, she does not like him at all, and their relationship is just a simple misunderstanding. Meanwhile, the lady continued to think about why the guy called her by an unfamiliar name. This was clearly not an ordinary coincidence. Most likely, the woman was also somehow connected to the hero, but for now, the details are completely unknown. At this moment, Qinglan realized that she really had a chance to get Yi Tian as a boyfriend, and now she liked him even more. Meanwhile, outside the city, several houses were being demolished. An excavator operator wanted to demolish everything in his path. At some point, all the walls fell and turned into bricks, but one of the houses still stood in place. The chief could not understand why this was happening. One of the workers explained to him that they could not demolish the building because the family was still inside, and besides, the little girl was interfering with the work. However, the man didn't even want to hear these excuses. If they were ordered to destroy everything here to the ground, then they had to do it as quickly as possible. The boss was so angry that he even hit one of his subordinates in the face with his palm. He behaved very rudely and disrespectfully. Immediately after this, a huge machine approached the house where there were still people. Would they really do this? At some point, the boss got furious again. Some idiot dared to block their excavator. Was he really tired of living? As it turned out, it was Lin Long. She couldn't allow them to do this, because their family has been living here for many years, and they just want to demolish everything. This stupid girl should have at least found out what company was behind all this before acting so recklessly. However, the student was not interested in the details. The fact was that this was happening against the laws of their country, and without their consent. The man was very amused by these words. This silly girl apparently doesn't know at all what rules this world works by. The boss understands that this girl might immediately back down if she is intimidated a little, whether this was part of the rules by which she lives. The student immediately grabbed the scoundrel by the hand and ordered him to immediately let go of her cheeks, otherwise she would call the police. This made the man laugh loudly and pointed out to his subordinates that this fool really wanted to call the police. The other workers were also amused by this. Lin Long really did behave rather ridiculously in their opinion, but from the outside, it actually looked disgusting. After this, the men began to behave even more inappropriately, which made the student very scared. Tears even appeared in her eyes. She didn't know who to turn to, in fact. There was only one person who could help her. Meanwhile, Yi Tian was calmly walking down the corridor, but this time, for some reason, everyone who passed by him called him by name and said hello. The hero couldn't understand why everyone around him was acting so strangely, since there hadn't been any significant events lately. Suddenly, Zhang approached him and said that now the guy had become a real legend of their school. Now every student respected him. However, Ye Tian didn't fully understand how this happened because he had always tried to act covertly. How could this happen? But in fact, there were more important things to do now. His comrade was holding an envelope in his hands. It was intended for the hero. Zhang found this paper when he entered the classroom. It seemed to be from Lin Long, because she was currently in big trouble with the construction company. As soon as the guy heard his girlfriend's name, he immediately wanted to read the letter. If something happened to her, he wouldn't hold back. This paper described the entire situation that happened to the girl's house. She doesn't know who she can turn to for help. At this moment, Ye Tian remembered his past life. When everyone bullied him, only Lin Long was brave enough to stand up for him.
Zhang noticed that his comrade was deep in thought about something. For the first time in a long time, his expression was rather sad. Apparently, this girl really meant a lot to him.
But after a few seconds, the hero comes to his senses and asks his friend if he knows where Lin Long's house is. They should go to help her as soon as possible. The friends immediately went to the specified address. Ye Tian had never been so determined to sort out this whole situation. He could not allow anyone dear to him to be harmed. At some point, the hero even started running, but his comrade couldn't keep up with him and asked him to wait a bit. Most likely such haste was unnecessary. Lin Long had protected him with all her might in the past, so the boy was forever obligated to respond in kind. Even if the emperor himself dared to touch her, he wanted to fly into pieces. Now his friend only had to wait for Yi Tian to arrive. Soon he would move to the right place, and then anyone who dared to offend her would regret ever having been born into this world. The fastest way to get there was by car, and for this purpose the hero used a special service. His friend asked him not to rush too much, as this could lead to an accident. But in reality, there was no time to waste, because at any moment the girl's house could be demolished, after which her family would have nowhere to live, and these scoundrels could not be given a chance. Yi Tian pressed the accelerator pedal to the floor, not even caring about traffic rules, so other cars had to avoid hitting the car. Zhang was very scared. His friend drove simply terribly. Now it became clear why he still doesn't have a license. With such skills, no inspector will pass his exam. However, the guy hastened to reassure him that he really had nothing to worry about. He would never allow dangerous situations to occur. After all, his brother was very dear to him. In fact, it was very difficult to believe, because they had already narrowly avoided serious accidents several times. At this rate, they would definitely not reach their destination. Meanwhile, a little boy appeared near the excavator. It was Lin Long's brother. He also went out into the street to prevent the destruction of his home. Let them just try to do that. The man was very amused by this picture. Just look at this brat. Apparently he has watched all sorts of heroic films and now imagines himself as the main character. Suddenly the boss orders his subordinates to immediately seize this child and knock some sense into him. Maybe that way he will at least gain a little sense. The next moment, several men grabbed the little boy by the arms and dragged him away. The child tried with all his might to break free and screamed, but these scoundrels did not react to this in any way. Lin Long was very scared for her little brother. She ordered the villain to let them go immediately. Don't they understand that right now they are breaking several laws at once? However, the boss didn't even respond to this. He simply approached the child and recommended that in the future he think more with his head before he starts to act like a hero. This man's whole demeanor made it clear that the laws did not apply to him, because he was the boss on this site, and that meant he could do whatever came into his head. The boy replied that only fools do not obey the law. How would he feel if everyone in the world behaved as they pleased? It would be simply terrible. The boss was very indignant because of such behavior. This brat still allows himself to behave like this. Right now he needs to be taught proper manners. At that moment, the girl ordered that her brother be released immediately, otherwise she would immediately call the police. They would come here and punish these hooligans. When the man heard this, he came closer to her. Didn't she still understand that all her actions were useless? They should just accept their situation. Right at that moment, the hero came to the rescue. With one deft kick, he sent this scoundrel high into the air. Now the real master was here. Because of this, the man landed directly on a metal excavator. After such a fall, he will most likely not be able to walk for several months. It would be useful for him to think about his actions. Right now, anyone who was going to harm this family will be punished. If they want to leave here alive, they should immediately fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Soon, several assistants helped the man to his feet. He was really hit hard. He even lost consciousness for a few minutes. He also had several teeth knocked out. The first thing he wanted to know was what had just happened, and who that impudent student was. Was he really completely tired of living? The boy realized that Ye Tian had come to their aid and told him everything that these bad people were going to do to him. They were pestering not only his sister, but him too. The guy decided to ask the boy again whether these builders really tried to humiliate his girlfriend in some way. He wanted to get the most accurate information possible. After that, he asked Lin Long herself if everything was okay with her, and if his friend could stand on her own feet. The girl said that everything was fine with her and that there was no danger. While the workers were threatening a small child, a hero appeared right behind them. Now they would learn what the consequences of bad actions could be, how they could even call themselves men. Yi Tian placed his hand on the shoulder of one of them and asked him to repeat the words he said a minute earlier, whether he really wanted to beat up a defenseless boy. The man was very scared because of this. How did this student manage to move behind him so quickly? These scoundrels were so shameless that they only thought about their own protection. Meanwhile, the boss climbed into the excavator's cabin and drove straight towards the guy. He wanted to finish off this upstart once and for all. He definitely wouldn't have anything to fight back against. However, Ye Tian wasn't scared at all and continued to stand in the same place as a minute ago. His face looked very confident such tricks would never work on him. Right now the man lowered a huge iron ladle directly onto the hero. It seemed to him that after such a thing, no living person could remain alive. However, the guy instantly vanished somewhere. So the huge pile of iron simply hit the ground. The boss achieved nothing with his actions. Meanwhile, the guy grabbed a huge hammer that was lying nearby. With the help of this thing, he can instantly destroy anything he wants. If only his enemies knew what awaits them now. Lin Long was watching this from the side right now. She was very worried about her comrade and kept shouting at him to be careful. What a pity that she couldn't help in any way. The man, in turn, laughed at the fact that the schoolboy picked up a hammer. How could such a thing stand up to an entire excavator? It seemed this guy was even dumber than expected. Immediately after this, Ye Tian rushed at the huge iron machine. From the outside it looked simply insane, but the hero understood perfectly well what he was doing. The other workers watched this exciting performance from the sidelines. Everyone became curious about what this crazy student was going to do. The boy was amazed at how Ye Tian managed to hold such a heavy hammer with one hand, since all the other people could hardly handle it with two. Moreover, the hero didn't just hold it in his hands, he managed to play with this thing like a toy. He spun it at incredible speed in his palm. But the boss didn't pay attention to this. The man was confident of his victory. It seemed that this brat simply went crazy with fear at some point, and was now doing rash things. Right now, he aimed a huge iron ladle at the guy for the second time. Would this weirdo be able to withstand such a blow and not escape? Ye Tian accepts this challenge. In fact, with the help of his unique chaos spiritual energy, it will not be difficult for him to strengthen his body to the point where it becomes harder than metal. But at some point he gets bored of just standing in one place, so the guy jumps high into the air. Now he has the opportunity to strike into the enemy's blind spot. Right now, this villain will feel the full force of justice. He should remember this moment well, because if this happens again, it will happen to him all the time. The man realized that his opponent was now right above him and tried to steer the mechanism in order to avoid a collision. But in reality, he didn't have a chance. Ye Tian moved 100 times faster. He easily managed to completely destroy the mechanism. At that moment, the boss realized that he was in serious trouble. He didn't even have a chance to escape anywhere. He could only scream helplessly in horror. Just a few moments later, a heavy hammer shattered the glass in his cabin and hit him right in the shoulder. The pain was incredibly strong. However, the hero did not think that such a punishment would be enough for him, because this scoundrel allows himself to take advantage of his position and humiliate the weak at the first opportunity. All the spectators were shocked by what they saw. Could this guy really have superhuman abilities? After all, an ordinary mortal would never be able to repeat something like this. And Zhang only just arrived at the scene of the incident. As it turned out, he had been trying to find a suitable place to park their car all this time. However, his help was no longer needed. Ye Tian managed to deal with all the villains in a few minutes. Lin Long could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her friend was truly capable of doing incredible things, but she just couldn't stand watching all these fights.